All set? Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. You guys all set?
Sort of, but not. Ready to roll? Okay.
Beautiful. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for your indulgence for a few minutes while we're getting the television situation squared away in some paperwork. So I'd like to welcome you to the Planning Board this evening. We have a few orders of business very quickly before we get into our public hearing, so if you'll just indulge us for a few moments. Board members, you have an agenda in front of you at this point, and I would appreciate a motion to approve that agenda.
Catherine, did you get the one that was going over? 4415 is going over to January. I spoke to him this afternoon. He doesn't have anything ready.
It is, you sure?
Yeah.
Where'd you go?
It's Kyberg's.
The auction house thing.
Yeah. He said that's going over to January.
He did say that?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. So with that
All right,
changed,
so with that modification,
So I'll make a motion to approve the agenda with 4415 of the special permits going over to January what?
January 11th.
11th. And he said he would come in and sign an extension, but you have to just remind him.
Okay.
Okay.
second.
So the motion's now made and seconded for discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed, ayes have unanimously. You have a number of minutes before you at this point. The only thing I'm going to mention to you is the minutes for February 9th, April 6th, and October 15th are just going to be pulled out for some more revision at this point. So you have minutes from January 12th, April 13th, May 11th, June 8th, June 18th, July 13th, October 26th, November 19th. With that in mind, are there any errors or omissions? Yes.
I had a comment on the minutes,
Which one specifically, sir?
mostly all of them. This goes back to January 12th,
Yep.
and, you know, it's hard to get all these minutes, plus having to read 375 pages 3 days before the meeting. And I'd like in the future that minutes would be done in a reasonable time, that they'd be ready from each meeting, because if you go back a year, you can't remember what happened a year ago. You know, it's just, I'd like to have staff look at the, so that we get our minutes, you know, within a month,
Yep.
or a week before the next meeting, something like that.
Well, I think with Holly coming on board now, that will make a little bit of a difference, because I know that everyone's been trying to pitch in, trying to fill her position at this point. So things do suffer a little bit at times.
Yeah, I'd say look into it,
yep.
a little earlier, you know?
Yep. So back to my original, thank you. Thank you. Back to my original question. Any errors or omissions is submitted? If not, I take a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion's now made and seconded for discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Mr. McLaughlin is also acknowledging in the affirmative. That's a unanimous vote by this board. Okay, that's going to bring us into public hearings this evening. So there's a number of continuances that are out there. 7716, which is the Valero Road subdivision. 7771, which is the White Elephant Hotel LLC. 16-15, Brotherhood of Thieves. 61-15, Seamus Crowley and Elizabeth Gennaro. 7905, Audrey Sturck. 21-15, which is 46 Surfside Road LLC, and we just learned about tonight 44-15, which is the Trustees of Auction House Realty Trust. So with that in mind, first thing before us tonight is 7887, which is Nantucket Island Resorts LLC. Good evening, sir.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Rick Bodette for Nantucket Island Resorts, LLC. If you remember, this application was held over from last month to allow Mr. Pesci to fully respond to all the the plans and for us to respond to some of his comments. He had numerous ones last month. We've now done that. I'm here with Jamie Anderson from R.J. O'Connell. Jamie sent in a letter responding to all of Mr. Pesci's comments, and you probably have that in your packet, as well as Mr. Pesci's response to those. And I think all of those have been addressed. There are just a few that on his comments I mentioned they were only partially addressed, and I think since then we've addressed them, or we will be able to address them on the final plans. There is one comment. He did have a new comment that I did want to address. Mr. Pesci mentioned that obviously with an amendment to the special permit that will be forthcoming to remove these lots from the existing special permit, there will have to be a stormwater analysis done on the remaining property left in the hotel. And he mentioned and actually suggested that he'd like to see a condition in this decision which states that there will be further stormwater analysis at a later date. And I wanted to discuss that with you because I frankly prefer that we not have a specific condition in this decision that says we have to satisfy something on another property, basically. I think it'll unduly encumber this property, and I think, frankly, it has to happen anyway. We can't sell these lots that we're creating without removing the special permit from the lots, and we can't apply for a special permit amendment without satisfying the board and Mr. Pesci as to the stormwater that's going to exist on that, stormwater solutions that are going to exist on that site. So I did talk to staff briefly about it this morning. Leslie suggested that perhaps something in the body of the decision that just states that we will be filing a special permit amendment might suffice, and we're happy with that as well. So certainly available to address any other comments the board has.
Okay. Board members? I don't see, I think we've pretty much vetted it through the board. Good. Andrew, Leslie, did you have anything to say?
Mr. Chairman, at the last hearing, the only outstanding issue was finalizing Ed Pesci's comments. Those have been completely finalized. He actually provided some clarification to some of his comments today, so that's all set. I would recommend that you close the public hearing and make a decision tonight.
All right, great. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a public hearing, so if anyone would like to comment on this application? Seeing no one.
Motion to close the public hearing.
And do I hear a second? Motion is, all right, I'm going to stop right here for 1 second.
Just the three of us.
Yeah, because I think Mr. McLaughlin hasn't been, he's missed, a few on
And
this
he
one.
hasn't
So
read
it's
back
just
in.
the three of us right
Right.
now on this, okay? You've missed a few of these, John.
Yeah.
So, okay, all right. So I just wanted to be clear on it. So, motion to close the public hearing was made and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed, ayes have unanimously. Pleasure of the board.
Motion to approve with that language that you have agreed to.
Stormwater.
And just sign it in the office.
And do I hear a second to
Second.
that? That motion's now made and seconded. Discussion on the issue. Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have unanimously. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you
Burdette.
very much.
Great, we're looking forward to this project.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to recommend that you hear the next two applications together. They're completely interrelated.
I'm inclined to
Yeah.
agree with you at this point. So, board members, if there's no problem with that, we're going to hear both 7904 and 56-15, but we will have to take separate votes on those, just so you know. But so, for Newtown Court subdivision for the applicant, Mr. Bodett, we're going to keep you busy, yes? Are you here? Oh, you're not here for this one. I'm so sorry. Mr. Fredericks, good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Myself, Whit Gifford, and Leo Azadorian are here to answer any questions.
Okay.
We had brought this to you as a preliminary plan, and I'll talk about both of these, if you don't mind, together. As I said before, when we purchased this property, our intent was to subdivide the property into two lots. to put in a rural road to minimize the impact on the neighborhood and more importantly, fit in from an aesthetic standpoint. We thought that was more appropriate. I've been involved in housing, as many people have been out here for many years. I'm a big fan of the Covenant program and felt that this was a perfect opportunity to take a second step, which is what the special permit's trying to do, which is to turn both of the lots that would be developed into Covenant lots. When you think about all the things that we talk about at town meeting and through the planning process, we're looking for places where there is water, there's adequate sewer, there's bus routes, we are near the congested parts of the middle part of the island. We believe this is a perfect location for this type of subdivision. We have put before you a road that is 20 feet wide. There is a 2-foot green strip on both sides. It's meant to have an apron that converts over to shell, again, in keeping with what we hope to be the feel of the neighborhood. We have modeled a lot of what will become a homeowners association, and I know that's not before you tonight, but it is a key element to this that will look like a Naw Shop or Nashwaquisset. There'll be a fair amount of restrictions. We understand that the lots are small and that the density on the property is you know, in many cases a little stronger than what most people are used to seeing, and we think we can control that through the homeowners association. The lots and our target for the lots tends to be island families for the Covenant lots. My daughters will be taking one in the front and the one all the way in the back. Not that that's really relevant. We've reviewed Mr. Pesci's engineering reports. He's raised a handful of what we think are very minor issues, and Leo's here to address them, but we don't see any issue in anything that he raised. We're happy to comply with what he suggests. There was a question that had been asked, and I don't remember if it was from staff or if it came through one of the abutters, having to do with the right to use this road in the future. We're absolutely amenable to that. We think that that's important. We think that the only thing we would ask is that they pay some reasonable and proportionate amount of the cost to put it in, and that they comply to the HOA, which we think is critical to the neighborhood. So with that, we're really here to answer your questions.
That's great, thank you. Leo, did you want to address anything very quickly, or?
Well, we spent the better part of today looking through Ed's report. We didn't have anything that stood out. A lot of the comments he made were housekeeping type of things, duplication of dimensions, so somebody didn't have to flip through them. The plan was adequately dimensioned as far as the drainage structures go. We did have to increase slightly one of the structures to be more in tune with the runoff calculation. It was just an oversight on our part. But all in all, we were in agreement with what he wrote, and easy fix, and we'll be proceeding with the changes shortly.
Excellent. Thanks. All right. Board members, any questions on either of these? Anything from staff from the perspective? No?
Mr. Chairman, I think all of the Pesci comments can be addressed, and we recommend approval of both applications.
Okay, great. This is a public hearing, ladies and gentlemen, so if anyone would like to comment on this, ask you to. Mr. Alger, good evening.
Good evening. Sarah Alger. I'm here for the Cody family. They're at 5 Newtown, which is directly abutting this property to the northwest. Mrs. Cody is here, as are her son and daughter. Obviously, this change in the neighborhood is something that the family is having a little bit of a hard time adjusting to, because it is going to be an extreme change in density in a place where they've lived for a very, very long time. That said, they understand that the rules are the rules. So they're trying to be cooperative. There are a few things, however, that we would love to see them address. I think first and foremost, the idea of having the road available as an easement is critical. We don't want to end up in a situation, say, like we did with Shady Lane, for example, where you end up with Shady Lane and then Shadier Lane, where you could have just as easily just had one road. We really don't want to have that. And in terms of paying, I'd like to get a better handle on exactly what the fair amount of payment would be and how that would be determined and when that would be paid. I mean, at the moment, Mrs. Cody lives at the property. She didn't have any idea of doing anything with her property. Now this has kind of come, it's a little bit of a surprise. She wants to be prepared for the future. She wants to have the flexibility of doing perhaps a similar thing to her own property in the future, just to try to maintain its value. That said, she's certainly not in a position to do an outlay of any significant funds at the moment to start paying for capital improvements that the Fredericks property would have to make regardless of what's happening. So I'd like to get a better handle on that, but I do think it's important. Just as an example, there's Ramos Court directly to the west of southwest, well, anyway, right behind these properties. And that's a private road. If there were rights in that road that had been granted at the time that subdivision was approved, then, we wouldn't even have to be putting a road in. You could work with existing infrastructure. So I think, I know the board's been a lot more forward-thinking of late, and this is an area where I think it would be important to do that. The second thing is on drainage. I just want to be sure, I didn't see Ed Pesci's report. I want to be sure that he has looked at it and he's clear that it's going to work. There is a significant drainage problem in this area now. I did spend quite a bit of time with Leo Azadorian on the phone. He was extremely helpful in kind of explaining to me what their drainage plans for this property are. The town apparently has not been cleaning out the drains in Newtown Road, and I think that's part of the problem. But when it does rain, not only does it puddle in Newtown Road, but there's a significant backup on this property as well as the Cody property. So I'd like to make sure that that's addressed. Some screening as part of the landscape plan would be great, obviously. And I think finally, just because of the situation with the road going right up against the Cody's boundary line, it would be wonderful if you would impose some added protections on when construction could start. This is right up against Mrs. Cody's bedroom. And they were starting, I think, doing some hole digging not that long ago at 7 o'clock in the morning. And, that's a little rough. So I know that's nothing that you've done on residential. And I know this isn't in the core. However, it would be nice, maybe the applicant would agree to something if you didn't want to set a precedent, which I completely understand.
Yeah.
But just in the interest of being considerate to a single elderly woman who's living alone, it's a lot.
Sarah, do you want the report?
Yeah.
Mr. Fredericks?
I'll respond to Sarah's concerns. As far as the cost of the road, we're happy to share any level of detail that she needs to see to understand that cost. We're not looking for anyone to purchase the right or anything. We're looking at engineering cost, utility expansion, and the cost of installing the road. We're happy to share that. My view is it would be simply split by the number of lots. So we have 3 that would be fed off of it. If they end up with, in their best thinking, 1 in the back, then they would pay something like 1/4 of the cost of that construction, and I'm happy to share those numbers. I can be relatively flexible as long as it feels reasonably fair. We're not trying to make any money off the expansion of the cost of that. I think the issue of screening, we have a very light sketch plan that we have talked to some of the kids that we're trying to bring into the Covenant homes. A huge part of this, and the reason I reference Nashua-Quistit, is screening and vegetation is one of the ways you soften density. So we're very comfortable with reasonable screening on all parts. If you've noticed since we bought it, we've just put in a substantial hedge. We have other things planned. We're happy to share that in any form that makes the Codys comfortable. I'm more than happy to sit down with the Codys and lay out a construction schedule that addresses the time of days and the starts. Again, I'd have to hear a little bit about what they need, but we have no intention of in any way being disruptive to the neighborhood. Typically, we are going to start at 7:30, 8 o'clock and finish at 4:30, 5 o'clock. But more than happy to talk and listen to anything that they need that is specific. So I'm not sure if I've addressed everything, but we certainly want to be good neighbors. Our children are going to live there both at the front end of a subdivision and the back end, and certainly want them to be in good standing with their neighbors.
I think that addresses everything. The only part of this that I'm at all uncomfortable about is, and it's because I'm hoping that this sets a precedent for future situations with roads like this, is that you get something in writing that's in the documentation that is clear how somebody buys in and gets the easement rights, so that we don't end up in a situation where, and I'm not saying that Mr. Fredericks would do this, but other people might. So if we're doing this as a model for the future, let's have it so that you know what you're getting into, and it doesn't end up being a false choice.
And Sarah, one other point, you had mentioned timing. We're not in any rush. They can come forward, and those rights would be, I would think, permanent in the road, and you'd have those rights for whenever it's right for them to consider doing that.
I think that's the important piece, because they're just not currently in a position where they want to be doing it.
Understand.
And I see staff kind of acknowledging they might have some possible draft language they can help craft with this to satisfy that concern.
Yeah.
So that we start a little template for the future with this.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. Was there anyone else in the audience who wanted to comment on this?
Bob Ramus. I'm a butter, Ramus Court. So I was just wondering, I'm not here to oppose. I'm just here to try and, I guess, if this is starting to set a precedent for this area, if there's 4 houses here, just say the Codys, they decide they want a 4. There's Snows on the other side, they want a 4. There's 12 houses. Ramus Court, just for the record, is private road, and nobody can use Ramus Court as a in or an out. So that's, that's the way it was when they did that road from the beginning. So, so that's right off the table is you can't use Ramus Court.
If you have no rights in a road, you
And
can't use it for
I
frontage.
just, maybe want to see things slow down a little bit. I just kind of got on board with this. It seems to change from, I talked to Dave today, and, from previous conversations with everybody in the neighborhood, everybody was concerned about the same thing. They don't want to end up to be, an Essex Road. And that's, I'm just... There's a lot of there's a lot of houses, and I'm sorry, that's the way I feel. I mean, if we're going to start, 4, there's 12 houses. Tom Stackpole's in the neighborhood. He's on Lewis Court. They could do 4 more houses over there. I mean, I could put a couple more houses on my lot. I mean, I'm just, that's kind of like I want to see things kind of slow down a little bit and figure out what we can do.
Okay. Great. Thank you. Anyone else in the audience wishing to comment on this? Go ahead.
We like to put a lot of conditions on a lot of things. But the one thing we haven't really done to this extent is put conditions on a subdivision of this size as to when they can work, when they can't work. We've done that with a lot of commercials. But we haven't gone down the rabbit hole here on residential of this size. And I hesitate to get involved at the planning board level doing this to residential subdivisions that don't entail 100, 200 structures. I can see a memorandum of agreement between you and Sarah and her client, but it wouldn't be part of. I'm a little uncomfortable making it part of a planning board decision because I don't even know how to enforce that. We'd have to have Marcus parked over there on the street. But I'm a little uncomfortable, Andrew. I don't remember in my tenure here doing this kind of stuff on small residential subdivision. Have we done it? I appreciate everything that's being said, having lived next to Sherburne Commons when it was built and them violating every rule and regulation on the planet. But I'm a little leery about going down this road, literally and figuratively.
I get the sense just listening to Mr. Fredericks and after having watched Sarah that I think they're kind of in agreement with each other that this isn't necessarily a road for us, but I get the sense both parties are going to be amenable toward each other and trying to work out a solution here and try to
work it out with Mr. Fredericks directly. I don't think the board needs,
that.
as long as
And,
he admits his willingness to discuss it.
and I think you've heard him publicly commit to that at this point, so I think that's a pretty strong statement right there at the moment. So I'm not sure I see this board getting into that area at the moment. Anyway, is there anyone else who wants to comment on this? All right, so board members, when we deal with this, we're actually going to have two different things we're going to have to deal with. First is the subdivision, and the second thing will be the special permits. So we can close the public hearing on both things if you're so inclined.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearings on both of them.
Okay, and do I hear a second to that?
Second.
Now, an alternate can sit on one, but not the other.
That's correct. So on the subdivision, that's going to be the four of us.
Okay.
And then on the special permit part for the covenant housing, that's where an alternate's going to be engaged. So let me just start with the first thing, which is the subdivision. And what's the pleasure of the board on doing that?
What's the surface of this subdivision road again?
Why don't you direct that to either Leo or...
What's the surface of the road again?
It will be, there will be a 12-foot apron or a 20-foot apron, whatever.
On to Newtown.
And onto Newtown, and then the road itself will be shelled.
All right, because I'm just, I'm reading the staff recommendation, and you don't have aprons at all on a dirt road or a shell road, and it says a shell apron, which doesn't exist on the planet. So I'm just looking at I'm just looking at this.
He meant pavement to shell. So
No, their individual driveways say shell aprons. There's no such thing.
I'm sorry. Okay. Thought you were talking about Newtown.
There's edgers, but that's not an apron. So I don't necessarily follow the staff recommendation to that extent.
Okay. All right, so what do we all want to do here?
Where do you want to go first?
We're going to start with the subdivision, which should be before us, because the subdivision will help to create the special permit ultimately at this point. So that's the first place I'd like us to go.
Andrew, are you comfortable with the engineer's report that we got?
Yes.
Yeah, late.
Yes.
I'll make a motion to approve the subdivision.
Okay, do I hear a second to
Second.
that? That motion is made and seconded for discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Mr. McLaughlin? He's in the affirmative, so that's a unanimous vote by the board on that part of the application. Mr. Trudell, I'm going to activate you for the second part of this, which is the special permit. Thank you, sir. The public hearing is duly closed at this point. Pleasure of the board.
Just a quick question of staff.
Yes, please.
I'm just circling back on something Sarah said, because as you know, you have no rights for anything in these roads if you're in a butter unless you're specifically deeded a right. That's not something we generally put in here either, correct? Because I think that's what they're after.
Well, Mr. Chairman, we need to put language like this in with a specific trigger. This has been the problem with...
Before.
It's clearly in your rules and regulations that you're supposed to be coordinating these ways, but there has to be a mechanism to ensure that isn't resistance after the fact.
So what would that mechanism look like, if that's part of my motion?
It would be in the homeowners association documents. There would need to be a trigger, when and if the property owner requested. We probably would have some sort of a sketch about them maybe finishing off the cul-de-sac and talk about some sort of formula about how the cost would be apportioned.
we can do that in the homeowners association as it applies to the lots that will have the covenant in place on them. And we can also incorporate it into whatever memorandum of understanding that we have for a future tie-in to the infrastructure that's going to be in the road.
I think that's what Sarah was sort of looking for.
I think it should be part of the subdivision approval, not the, I think you need to revisit your subdivision approval, and I don't know that you should be doing it as part of the special permit for the covenant lots. I think it should be a subdivision in your statement of conditions of subdivision approval.
Board members,
I'll
your
make a motion to reopen the subdivision vote.
Second.
All right, so to formalize the
We'll go
process.
backwards, yeah.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, so go ahead.
I'll make a
Let's-
motion to incorporate the appropriate language that you all work out relative to future access to that road by an abutter.
Second.
Is that where you're going?
Yes.
Yeah. All right, thank you.
Second.
So that motion's now made and seconded. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Ayes have unanimously. All right.
And I'll make a motion
Now
on
we're
the
back
second
to-
one
on the
to
special permit.
approve.
Okay, do I hear a second?
Second.
That motion's made and seconded for discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have unanimously. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next thing before us is 57-15, Meshemy Lane LLC for Ryan Conway. Plan one Tacoma Way for the applicant. Hi. Hi. Anything you want to bring before us at this point? No?
No. Well, just want to mention it's a basement apartment, so it wouldn't be visible from the street, or it's not like a structure that you're going to see. That's why I think 680 square feet would be
Okay.
fine.
Question.
Go ahead.
Andrew, on the recommendation, isn't he applying for a tertiary dwelling permit from us, or are we talking about a building permit separate from us?
I had a question on that myself. I was,
It's the same thing.
Mr. Chairman, I think there was some confusion about, just internally, not with the applicant,
Okay.
about the form that was filled out.
Yep.
So that was more of an administrative comment. He's clearly applying for a second, or for a tertiary dwelling.
Okay.
Yeah, there's.
Was there anything else?
No.
I just have one quick thing, Ryan. Just kind of looking at the parking configuration at this point, and I was chatting with staff about it a little bit. I'm not sure if there's something we could do to maybe tidy that up a bit, and I kind of, with Andrew and Leslie, I think they might have a thought or two in the process, or did you want to try to work with him a little further?
Mr. Chairman, I guess I learned that the parking was approved as part of the second dwelling. Is that
Okay.
right? So that parking arrangement on this one has already been approved?
It has
There's-
been, okay,
There's some
so-
others that we need to take a look at.
Then I withdraw what I just said. Thanks. Thank you for clarifying that with me. Okay. So, board members, is there anything else on this application?
No.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is a public hearing. If anyone would like to comment on this.
Motion to close the public hearing?
Thank you. And do I hear a second?
Second, thank you.
Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Oh, I'm sorry. This is a special permit too. Diane, you're going to sit on this one. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have it unanimously.
Motion to approve?
And do I hear a second? Motion's made and seconded. Discussion? Hearing, I'm sorry, did you?
I said second.
No, I thought I heard something else. I thought I heard someone say, Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have unanimously. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks. Next thing before us is 58-15, which is Christopher T. Oberg on 30 Macy Lane for the applicant. Mr. Wilson, good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Michael Wilson on behalf of Christopher Oberg, and he is the applicant. He's asking for a special permit to create a secondary lot under the Affordable Housing Needs Covenant Program. And he's also requesting a waiver of the second curb cut requirement there. You see on your plan, he's endorsed the location where he would like to have the lot come down to Macy's Lane, and that would be the proposal for the access to the rear of the lot where the second structure is to be located. The primary structure already benefits from existing parking, which has to the west of it, between the parking area where the headlights of the cars would be and the house, very mature vegetation, very tall, almost completely obscures the structure from the road. So you don't want to interfere with that if we can avoid it, and give the secondary lot their own access. Parking would be provided as it's shown on the plan. What he's hoping, and what we don't have right now, is the proposed footprint. He's looking for a house that might be up for being moved onto the lot. So we would obviously have to come back through with the HTC before we do anything on the actual structure itself. It sits in the R5 zone. With respect to the lot sizes, they all fall within compliance of what the code requires.
Yeah, go ahead. Shoot.
Mike, this parking doesn't work at all. You can't get out of space 2 unless you airlift the car out of there.
Well, space 3 is sort of optimistic if you need it. I think the secondary dwelling would only require 2 spaces.
Yeah, no, you can't. You can't get out of lot number 2.
Okay.
You can't get out of anything except for space 3. Period. So I don't know if you can get an easement from lot B to straighten this out. So at least you have realistic parking, like if you go in and square and then back in and go out again. But this parking isn't going to work at all. Not for anybody.
Perhaps they could be angled to be consistent with that northwesterly run.
I see that, but I don't think that's going to work either. I think you need to square off that corner in order to get 2 cars at an angle even that can back all the way down the driveway. This is a problem. I don't mind creating secondary lots provided they make sense. But in this case, one has, I don't know, 4,800. The other one is 3,300. I don't know how that's working. But I'm having an issue with the parking, not the fact that he wants a secondary lot. That's fine. But this parking is not working.
Could I move to amend and withdraw the parking as it exists, just asking the board to vote on the secondary lot application, and then when we're in front of the Historic District Commission, we know what type of structure is in there. We would still have to comply with the parking, and that would have to be worked out between the surveyor, engineer, and the applicant.
Well, I don't think you can get into too much trouble with the HDC, especially if the structure moved that way. You give yourself more parking. If the structure moved towards the south, you could get parking right up next to the building. I think where you're going to run into trouble is at the building department, because you don't have the requisite legal parking space that you can actually get in and out of. I think that's where you're going to run into trouble, is on a zoning issue there.
If the structure were located in that southerly portion of the secondary lot,
You got room.
there would be plenty of parking, I would think, in theory, pointing forward toward the structure.
Yeah.
Again, we need to see what's available on the used building market and what the footprint that would drive where we could fit it.
Okay.
But there's certainly, it's not going to benefit anybody to have dysfunctional parking.
Well, as I say, I don't mind creating a secondary lot. It's
Thank
just
you.
that you're going to have problems with your parking if it stays the way it is.
Just as one member of the board, though, I'm a little leery about deferring to another board for the parking, because that generally is under our purview at this point. So I'd really like to consider it as an entire packet. I don't want to set this kind of precedent where if it doesn't quite work, we're going to defer to another board to deal with that situation.
No, don't defer. It's just,
But
you're
that's
going to get nailed by
it-
Marcus.
Yeah, it's okay, but I'm afraid that's kind of where that was heading in my mind.
No,
Go
the
ahead.
HCC doesn't care
Andrew?
about that.
Mr. Chairman, 2 parking spaces are required, and you can do a simple tandem, so you don't really need to have them back there like that.
Could I work it out with staff after we know where we're going with the structure?
Yeah.
As far as what the parking configuration will be, provided that we're certainly obligated to bring 2 spaces to the lot.
I think that's a lot more reasonable.
Thank you.
For you,
Go
Mr.
ahead.
Chairman,
But
does
please.
the existing parking, does that have an apron now, where
I
it says
bel-
gravel drive?
I can't recall. But if there needs to be an apron, we can certainly have one installed. There would be an apron proposed for the second one to the affordable lot, so while they're there doing that, if that's not present in the field, we would certainly go ahead and accept that as a condition.
Okay. The other point that Ms. Snell just mentioned is that the parking area needs to be 20 feet deep unless you're doing a 20 and a 17-foot. So it may be out, it may need to be lengthened a little bit.
On the existing parking?
Yeah.
I think that what we have is that there's a portion of the Macy Lane road layout that doesn't necessarily reflect what's in the field. I think where you see the line for Macy Lane and you see the dotted line for the parking,
Yep.
It may be that they have it, it's just within the area of the layout. But if staff wants another answer on that, we can certainly bring that in.
I guess on our list to just go over is to make sure that all the parking fits entirely within the lot. So
Sure.
none of the parking should be hanging out into the layout.
Agreed.
Okay. All right.
That's perfectly acceptable.
All right. Anything else from the board? From staff? This is a public hearing, ladies and gentlemen, if anyone would like to comment on this. Okay, Mr. Borchett, you're going to sit on this one.
I make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded for discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have it unanimously. Pleasure of the board.
I'll make a motion to approve the secondary lot. Since we don't have a house before us, Andrew, we don't have parking before us. We don't have any requirement for parking on the new lot because there's nothing there. So I don't want to get tied into a parking plan when we don't even know what's there. It's a vacant lot at the moment. Where do we go with that?
I think what we would ask the applicant to submit a revised plan, which would show the parking spaces fitting onto the property. There's a building envelope that's pretty much sketched out here, which meets the minimum, at least the 32 by 24, meets the requirement of the bylaw.
Yep.
So,
It may move, though.
And then move back.
well, we could have the surveyor at least outline what the setbacks are in the final plan.
Yeah.
And the building would have to fit in that, and then we could leave it to the HDC to decide on the house, as long as it fits in that envelope.
And they have parking.
And then I think we just need to get some clarification. We have to make sure these setbacks work and that the existing parking is sort of straightened out.
That's my motion.
Oh,
With staff.
And I guess for clarity, they are asking for the waiver on the setbacks. Is that what you're doing between the lot lines?
Between the lot lines.
So you can see that as shown, there's a setback that's 3.6 feet at the back corner,
Yep.
and then 3.8 feet. So this is the internal lot line,
The
not
internal,
the
not
extra.
the- above.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and then there's a 4 foot, roughly 4 foot at the other corner.
Yep.
Yep. So all those conditions.
That's me,
I'll
my
second
motion.
her motion with those conditions and that language, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. So that motion is made and seconded. Is there discussion on the issue? All right, if you're all clear on this application, then all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed, ayes have unanimously. Great.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
staff.
Appreciate it. Next thing before us is 59-15, which is Karen Flanagan, Cliff Delaney Trust, on 64 Cliff Road. Sorry, for the applicant. Hi.
I'm Sophie Metz for the applicant.
You can actually
Pull it down.
a bit. There you go.
I'm Sophie Metz for Karen Flanagan.
Okay.
So I hope, I didn't submit the application, but I hope it's clear. The house borders Cliff and Delaney, and the back portion of the house on Delaney has a garage connected to the house, and so these guys were just hoping that you guys would allow a second curb cut in to that garage.
I got a question.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Andrew, being as that this was my family's property, there were 2 driveways already on the property. They were grandfathered. They've been there all along. They're coming in where the stone fences, the stone posts used to be on the front side, and they seem to be coming in where the old driveway was on the back side. They don't need to be here. They've shifted about 10 feet, that's it. But they're still on, even though there's like the backyard has been subdivided, where the house was subdivided, the two driveways seem to be exactly where the driveways have always been since 1926. So I don't know why you're here.
That was the assumption that my clients had made when they purchased this lot with the plans that were associated, but we were told we had to come.
Why?
Andrew?
Oh.
But second curb cut, is it?
No, they've had
According to
both
Leslie, there was
driveways.
the demolition and other things that had happened that it's, I know what you're saying, Linda, but I don't know that it is in the exact same position.
It's about 5 feet further towards the cliff, that's it. But
Well-
they've always had two curb cuts on this particular part of the
No, I understand, but the lot has been subdivided, it is a new lot. I think they're here now, I think the board should entertain it.
Just for the sake of argument?
Well, I think that whenever there's a significant change to a property, we get to revisit it. I don't,
Well, then for the board's edification, the two parking accesses to this lot have always been there since 1926.
and Mr. Chairman, I think that's perfectly good, a good argument to support I think staff recommends approval of it. The one thing I do want to leave on record, though, is that the depth in front of the garage, there should not be parking that, again, is hanging into the public right-of-way. There's no sidewalk there now, but that area is building up quite substantially. There may need to be a sidewalk there, so the cars, even though it'll be an enforcement issue, I think it's that the board should have it in its permit, so there's no question in the future. So it could be used as an access, but parking of cars of a certain size that will hang into that shouldn't be happening.
Understood.
Because where you have the apron is in the roadway layout.
Got it.
So they'll have to put their mini car in that little mini garage.
Got it.
Okay. Anything else from the board or from staff? No. All right. This is a public hearing, ladies and gentlemen. If anyone would like to comment on this. No, I guess
Motion
not
to
at
close
this
the
point.
public hearing.
Second.
Diane, you're going to be sitting on this one, dear. Okay?
Second.
So the motion is made and seconded to close the public hearing. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? I'll
Motion
take
to
that
approve.
as a
Second.
unanimous vote. Motion is made and seconded for approval.
Can I just ask one?
Yes,
question?
ma'am, you may.
On that second driveway entrance on Delaney Road, how wide is that?
I don't know what the landscape architect did. He typically does 12 feet, but it could be any size that you guys want it to be.
Well, it looks a lot bigger than 12 feet, and I just was wondering make sure it wasn't over 20 feet.
That mass that it's going into is 17 feet wide, so I know it has to be,
It's about
at most, he's drawing it at 14.
14 feet.
Okay. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
All right. So the motion has been made and seconded for approval. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have unanimously. Thanks.
Thank you.
Next thing is set 60-15, which is Kenneth C. Cawthon Incorporated, 4 Tomahawk Road. For the applicant, good evening. How are you? Good. Yep.
No, just
Is it?
any questions, that's all we're doing.
Okay. So
We're just
board-
putting up a very simple building, that's all
Yep.
we want to do.
No, it seems straightforward. So, board members, is there any questions that you have for him? Anything from staff? This is a public hearing, so if anyone would like to comment on this.
Motion to
So,
close the public hearing.
John, you're going to be up on this one. Thank you, sir. And do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have it unanimously.
Motion
Pleasure
to
of the board.
approve.
Second.
That motion is made and seconded. Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, ayes have it unanimously. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
All right, much appreciated, gentlemen. So I'm going to take it we want to hear these next two simultaneously like we did beforehand, and we'll just... let me kind of... I might kind of disagree a little bit. Leslie,
Actually, Chairman, on this one, I think you should take them up separately.
you want to do them separately? Okay, all right. Sorry, I didn't realize. So first thing before us is 7903 Manchester Circle subdivision modification. This is off of Somerset Road.
Well, I think actually Arthur Reed for the applicant. I don't see how I can discuss one without the other. So
Let's see where it goes. I'm getting a sense from the board and staff they want to.
The application here in the special permit application is to approve the creation of a secondary lot, covenant lot, and also to have separate driveway for it and for the other house as they exist on the property. And the point that causes us to need a modification of the subdivision is the fact that the original language in the original decision that created the subdivision prohibited additional dwellings. Additional lots being created on that roadway. Once again, this is a covenant lot, so it's not really going to have any impact more than a primary and secondary dwelling would. And secondly, there's a precedent for this in that another owner fronting on the road, actually not one of the original Manchester lots in the subdivision, but another lot from another property that abutted it, owned by Cliff Williams, was granted a modification with regard to his application about 10 years ago. And what we think would be the appropriate way to handle it would be for the board to modify the original decision to provide that the limitation against creation of further lots fronting on that road would be able to be waived by the board in any particular instance. And obviously we would suggest that it be waived in this instance.
Okay. Board members, any question? No. Anything from staff? Go ahead, Andrew, please.
Mr. Chairman, I have just a couple of questions. So there's a portable storage tent in the back that crosses the lot line. What's the status of that?
I don't know. I am assuming that if it crosses the lot line, that it's going to be removed.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, the amount of parking, so for the new building, there's 2 spaces created in the front, and then the parking goes around to the back, and then there's 2 additional spaces in the back. It just seems like it seems like a lot of parking in that one area where it seems like, why couldn't there be an opportunity to make that work a little bit better together? Mm-hmm. It just seems like there will be a lot of, it's just not very well coordinated with what's happening at the end of the road. It puts a bunch of cars in the front yard between the building, where there's looks like a wide parking area next door as well.
I didn't draw the plan.
Okay. So I would ask that the board hold this until we get at least a chance to have a talk about that.
Andrew, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
On the plan, which is on page 166 of your packet,
Yep.
there is proposed, it says proposed parking drive, which enters, so there's a new parking area coming off a leg of the, in Manchester Circle. So to the left, there's 2 spaces and I believe a turnaround. Then to the right, there's a drive that kind of encircles the entire house to the back, and then 2 additional spaces way in the back next to where the portable tent is. So, in effect, the whole lot becomes parking around that house. Now, if you look next door at the existing house, there's a pretty large parking area there as well. The two entrances are kind of right next to each other. It just seems like a lot of area dedicated to parking and vehicles seems a little excessive. Like it could be reduced and maybe some of the landscaped areas a little bit more organized there. If the properties were either working together or something. We don't usually see that much parking around a house. I don't.
Lots with American family, lots of cars, boats and cars.
So, anyway, that's my suggestion.
Okay. All right. Anyone else on the board have any comments? Sorry. Go
Mr.
ahead.
Chairman, just
So
to be
sorry.
clear, I think that the
Yeah.
condition could certainly be addressed, but I think before the special permit is issued for this site plan needs some work.
Okay.
Can we approve either one of them?
Either way, if you're going to consider any covenant lots on this, you would need to address the subdivision issue. So 7903 has to be addressed, for any lot in here. And I think that's up to you and whether I think it's an appropriate place for that to be allowed. In terms of issuing the special permit, so it's number 6215, but I think we should wait.
So we can approve the subdivision part?
Yes.
And wait on the special permit part?
Yes.
Yep, I think that's what staff would like to do.
Okay, that would be my motion.
Well, we're really not
Use a public
quite
hearing now.
there yet, because you actually haven't heard the second one yet, and the second thing before us is that we've still got a public hearing that we need to open at this point. So is there anything else from the board or from staff? Ladies and gentlemen, is there anyone who'd like to comment on this? All right, not hearing anyone want to comment on 7903. Be appropriate to close the public hearing?
I'll make a motion to close the 7903 subdivision
Okay.
application.
Motion's made and seconded for discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have it unanimously. Pleasure of the board.
Motion to approve.
And do I hear a second?
Second.
Discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have it unanimously. Mr. Borch, you're sitting on the next one, which is 6215. I think we've heard both from staff and the board at this point. Let me just go right to a public hearing. If anyone would like to comment on this, hearing none.
I'll make a motion to continue to January 11th. Is that where we're going?
Yes. Second.
All right. So we're going to continue. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have it unanimously. Thanks.
Mr.
Yes,
Chairman,
sir.
we also have on the agenda later on the A&R plan, and since you're putting over the special permit, the A&R plan, I guess, as will go beyond the 21 days, I
Yeah.
guess we should withdraw and resubmit.
Without prejudice.
Yeah, and I think we can accept that without prejudice at this point.
I'll make a motion to accept the withdrawal without prejudice.
Well, you want to
Get
wait
it
till
out
we
of
get-
here?
We
You
can
guys
wait
want
till
just,
we get to
are
that.
you fine just skipping into this right now, everyone?
Huh.
All right. So,
I'll make a motion to allow the withdrawal of A&R 7907 Manchester without prejudice.
okay, and
Second.
Leslie?
Mr. Chairman, we recommend that you waive the.
Waive the
submittal
filing fee.
Oh,
Yeah, and waive the
That's what I was
filing
gonna
fee.
ask.
Yeah, that's
Thank
what
you.
we did.
Yep.
So that motion is made and second. If you're all clear on the motion at this point, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have it unanimously. Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay.
That brings us to 63-15 6 Marble Way LLC, the westerly portion of 6 Marble Way. For the applicant,
The applicant, Stephen Cohen, sir.
Mr. Cohen, good evening.
Yeah,
Brian Sullivan, I am the applicant.
Okay, great. Hi.
What the hell does this say?
so just for the record, the assessor, I believe, has now renamed this lot as 8 Marble Way. So what's being proposed here, I first want to point out a couple of things. The staff report has this noted as an MCD. It's not actually not an MCD. The square footage of the building is less than 4,000 square feet, so it doesn't require an MCD. And I also do want to point out that the lot at over 15,000 square feet is more than 50% larger than required under the zone. So it's an oversized lot for the zone. What Mr. Sullivan is proposing is essentially a car storage facility, not a garage that would be used on a regular basis, but just essentially dead storage and warehousing. The facility would not be staffed on a regular basis. You would have to make an appointment or arrangement in advance, either through a caretaker or through Mr. Sullivan or someone who he hires to come in and get the cars in and out. The floor plan would fit about 20 cars, and with potentially up to 28 or 30 cars if they put in some of those racks. He hasn't totally worked that out, but no consumers would be driving their cars in and out of the building. It would all be done essentially like a concierge service, either by them or by Mr. Sullivan or his employee or some professional. There's no proposed exterior uses. There's no car washing or whatever outside the building. There's no proposed exterior commercial uses. There are 2 residential apartments. One is a 2-bedroom dwelling and one is a 3-bedroom dwelling, and those might have ancillary residential uses. Mr. Sullivan might keep his individual personal boat there, but there wouldn't be any proposed boat storage outside or car storage outside or anything like that. It would essentially be a lot that looked like it'd have a barn on it, and you wouldn't really be able to tell what's going on inside from the exterior. We anticipate there being very, 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 very few vehicle trips, because the whole point of the thing is essentially long-term storage. Over the winter, between the summer and stroll, those kind of things. It's not it's not your garage where you're moving your car in and out all the time. It's just the facility's not set up for that kind of in and out. The parking that's proposed is 5 parking spaces with 2 in the front and 1 in the back, including 1 handicapped. I was a little confused, and maybe the staff can provide some clarification as to whether or not we need the parking waiver. If the 2 apartments are considered a primary and secondary dwelling, then I don't think we actually need the parking waiver, but that if they're considered apartments, then it would need the parking waiver that we've requested. And again, my client actually has space to do more parking if the board wanted it, but because the facility itself is housing cars and there's no consumers coming there, we didn't really see the purpose of having, we'd rather have more green space and less driveway and less parking. Although the entire facility is proposed to be screened with evergreens. The relief that's being applied for is only 2 things. One is use of interior-exterior warehousing and storage under the bylaw requires a special permit no matter what, and then the optional parking waiver if needed. It's not an MCD. I do want to address a couple of the points that were raised in the staff report. I think that I've already covered essentially the business plan. If there are additional questions, Mr. Sullivan and myself are happy to address them. The traffic, again, is anticipated to be extremely low, and the driveway width could be adjusted for basically whatever width the board wanted. It could be residential or commercial width. A lighting and screening plan. The screening is shown on the proposed plan, but we'd be happy to do a lighting and screening plan through staff if the board wanted. Obviously we'd have to be compliant with the dark sky law to begin with, or bylaw to begin with. And then there was a question about whether or not the units would be inclusionary housing. Since inclusionary housing is for MCDs, they would not be inclusionary housing, although they would essentially be what we would now call workforce housing, which is not a technical term, but a colloquialism that's now circulating. The intent is that they would be either year-round or peak seasonal. This is not a weekly rental type of situation. So we anticipate very little turnover and a high quality of residential use, not some kind of frat house atmosphere. So I'm happy to take any questions from the board.
Great, thank you. Go ahead.
Steve, I believe the spaces that are being asked to be waived is the 1 per 900 for storage and warehousing. Since you have parking already for the storage and warehousing in the building,
Yeah.
you are required to have five spaces for the bedrooms, the duplex upstairs, 1 per bedroom. You are not required to have a handicap space for a residential unit upstairs.
Right.
So the way the application came in was that how many spaces, 4 or 5 spaces for the commercial storage and warehousing is what is being asked to be waived.
Yeah.
All of the spaces required for the apartments, the 2 apartments, are being provided on site.
So it kind of doesn't matter whether you view it as requiring the 10 spaces or 5 spaces. We can comply either way because the facility itself is providing, the whole thing is parking spaces. And there's no anticipated commercial consumer use, and there's no anticipated on-site employees except people who are bringing cars in and out of the facility.
Right.
It's not going to be staffed from 8 to 6. It's sort of just when a car is needed, it would go in or out. So I think this is the very definition of where the requirements are a fairly significant redundancy. But whatever the board feels is appropriate, we're happy to take the 5 spaces that are offered with obviously the commission knows that if there's a problem, you can reopen the public hearing and require more parking, which is what I would suggest you do since we don't necessarily want to pave the whole thing. If we could save some of the green space, that'd be better.
But the 5 spaces that are being provided are for the residential uses. That's the point. And you do not need a handicap space showing on the plan for that use, because that kind of restricts one of the uses right out of the apartment. You need 5 clear parking spaces, period. Not handicap.
We could remove that and just have it be an extra wide
It needs
space.
it needs to be 5 spaces for the apartments, period.
Yeah, I know we're not legally required to have a handicap space until you hit 20. So
Well, it doesn't matter. You're not legally required to have a handicap space for an apartment, period.
Right.
But if you have a handicap space here and you have 5 spaces upstairs, nobody's disabled to park in that space, you have cut out one of the spaces for the apartment. So the handicap space has to go off the plan. These 5 spaces are solely for the apartments. They need to be marked that way.
If the commission would like that signage and restriction, we're happy to take that commitment.
Anyone else on the board? Andrew, Leslie, do you have anything? Please.
The area that you've marked as sewer field, is that is that surface going to be grass or what's over
Yes.
that?
Right. Just a septic field with grass over it.
Yeah, I'd intend that to be a grass area and then the driveway to be gravel with some concrete pad to get in and out of the garage space.
Okay. And Mr. Chairman, through you, also, I think you know that this is an area that's being considered for sewer extension, so there would be some sort of requirement that we have put on other applicants in the area to connect to sewer within a certain time, so you're aware of that?
I would look forward to a sewer connection as soon as possible.
Okay.
Anything else?
I don't agree with that. If you just put in a brand new septic, I don't agree with that.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is a public hearing, so if anyone would like to comment on this.
Mr. Chairman, could I ask one?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I'm
Just-
sorry.
please.
Is the what's the status of the building? Does it have HTC approval?
It does. No. It does. Oh, no, I take it back. I'm sorry.
We haven't seen it yet.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
So it would not get bigger.
Okay.
Oh, you got that.
Go ahead. So I'm going to ask you to please come up to the microphone, identify yourself for the record, and if you're in the butter, just give us your address as well, too, please. Howdy.
Hi, Mary Richrod, 2 Marble Way.
You can pull that down a bit, dear, if you need to. There you go.
We've gone through this now for months. I just feel that this is so inappropriate for this particular neighborhood. It has always been totally residential, and this has just happened in the last year. It is going to increase the traffic. The road is already in very bad shape. It's going to increase the traffic tremendously, and it's going to totally alter the character of the neighborhood. So I really object to them approving any alterations that are going to expand the amount of traffic we have and alter the neighborhood totally. And that's my only comment.
Okay. Great, thank you. Anyone else wishing to comment on this? Hi.
Leah Cabral, 7 Marble Way.
Matthew Hill, 7 Marble Way.
We agree with our neighbor. We just moved into the neighborhood. We're kind of just learning about this whole process. But again, like what she said, we think that it's definitely going to increase the traffic on the road, which is already in bad shape and pretty narrow. I know that they said it's low impact, but 20, we heard 60 cars, but they just said 20 to 30. So that's obviously going to increase the traffic and the noise in this residential neighborhood.
And it's also a concern that he's expressed what his intentions are, but if this property gets sold and people want to change it, it could just start to spiral in the commercial aspect of the neighborhood.
Yeah, it's a really quiet neighborhood as of right now. So this large building, it doesn't really go with the whole neighborhood feel.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Okay, great, thank you. Anyone else wishing to comment on this?
Hi, I'm Erin Myers. I live on Sleepy Hollow, which is only accessed via Marble Way. And some of my concerns are when they're saying there will be no staffing, so does that mean that somebody can come and get a car at any hour of the day? I think we're going to have to talk about restrictions as to what's appropriate as to when someone can come and go and get a car. Other concerns are just in general, I was wondering if the board could answer some questions about C-Tech, and is there any other businesses like this in similar residential neighborhoods? Because from what we gathered as a neighborhood and drove around and looked at other C-Tech zoning, it's pretty small, and we didn't notice any large warehousing or multi-bay garages. Or we're just wondering if this is an appropriate type of business considering it is primarily residential.
All right.
With just the small C-Tech.
Okay. So those are your two questions?
Yes,
All right, so I'm
please.
going to turn to Mr. Cohen to answer the first one.
So just as a clarification, it's not that there won't be staff, it's that it's not going to be a regularly staffed facility where people could come and go from 8 to 6:30, which is the proposed hours. It's that you would only have access from 8 to 6:30, and that someone would only be coming to bring a car or to take it out, which we would anticipate would be very infrequently.
Okay.
But consumers would not be getting their own cars.
Right, but so somebody couldn't request a car at 5 o'clock in the morning?
No. Brian likes to sleep in.
No,
Right, I mean,
we just want to make sure
Yeah.
All right, just make sure.
that stuff
Right.
like that could be.
That's right. We
addressed.
expect the commission to impose reasonable hours of operation. And what was the other question? Sorry.
No, that was more for the board as whether or not they could answer the question as to in other C-Tech zones on island, in residential neighborhoods, what types of, is this an appropriate type of, considering it needs a special permit, is this an appropriate type of business in a residential neighborhood?
So let me turn to staff for that at this point.
Mr.
Because
Chairman, I think a good example of this would be on Young's Way. One side of the street is completely residential, and the opposite side is RC2 still. But the type of development that's happened on the commercial side is consistent with what's being proposed here. And those two uses, the commercial on one side and the residential on another, have worked. We do have one other area where there's C-Tech on one side and Gregland, and that was recently done in the Richmond properties, and the redevelopment over there is just starting. So that's maybe not the best
Yeah, we
example.
didn't notice much residential in that area. So we were
It's-
just trying to figure out where else do you have restricted by, so Young's
All right,
Way.
let me let
There-
Andrew and Leslie finish up, and then I'll turn to the board.
On-
So go ahead.
On the Richmond side, I mean, the residential piece is coming. There is some new redevelopment on the commercial side. But again, I think Young's Way is really a good example of how the two can work together.
Thank you. Go ahead.
CTEC, CI, CN, all these things are new. All of these areas in a much larger area were residential commercial since the inception of zoning. Residential commercial meant that you had residential and commercial in the same place, in the same neighborhood. If you've been out to Macy's, Lane, Pine, whatever it is, Pine Tree, and what's the third one? Marianne. You see a lot of commercial businesses right next to a residential business, and there are places, the RC zone all over the island, which is now being decreased by Andrew and the board, one section at a time, without unintended consequences, are being converted. So we can put the residential over here, if they're that separate, and put the commercial on this side of the street, like Andrew was saying out at Richmond. So it's pockets all over the place where they're residential and commercial right smack next to each other, because that's what the residential commercial zone meant. But Andrew has refined it to the point of where, okay, a little more industrials over here, so no residents, and a little bit more different kinds of commercial over here that can work with residences. So it's been long overdue. Zoning started in 1972, and it was just a patchwork quilt. So we're trying to actually make the zoning look like what's underneath it. But that section over there where you are has always been RC2, always.
Yeah, we understand that commercial exists there, it's going to exist, and that's not what we're opposing. What we're opposing is
The type.
the scale and things that aren't necessarily planning board, but like out of character of the neighborhood, where it's a little dirt road, and then there's no parking on Marble Way, and as owners on Sleepy Hollow, another private road, we certainly don't need or want any parking overflow. Understand this business, but like someone said before, this is one business. Another business would have to come before you and get more permitting, but it's just, as a neighborhood, how can we keep
It's not MC.
things restricted and still be commercial?
Any changes to, it runs with the land, not with the owner. Zoning does.
Right, but once there's a giant warehouse up,
Any changes would have to come back here, go back out to notice. If there's a problem with the activities that are taking place on this lot, the planning board has the right to enforce it. It's not a free-for-all after it goes in. The planning board also has the right to reopen the public hearing if problems arise and put more conditions on or do whatever we need to do to make it compatible with the rest of the neighborhood. So even though, let's say, they get the special permit for this basically dead storage for 9 months of the year, cars go in once, they come out once, people come back and forth at the same time everywhere, May, June. They leave in September, October, and don't come back again. We could always reopen it and try to address it again, change the hours, do whatever we need to do. So it's never a closed, done deal, and the planning board never loses absolute control over enforcement and over the activities that are taking place there, or any activity that would come after it to change the nature of the activity. So always be rest assured that we are always here.
my other question would be more about the number of cars. It has 20 in the picture. Then we've been hearing 28, 30. We've heard more numbers. I've seen an email from Mr. Sullivan saying it needs to be over 30 to make it work. So my question is, where do the extra cars go?
Mr. Cohen, Mr. Sullivan?
So the plan shows 20 cars on it. My hope was to do some lifts on the back side so you can put one car under and one on top of it. And then it's not necessarily that it has to happen for me to work, but it would be best case scenario for me if I had more than 20. but under 30-ish.
Just one further comment.
All right, hang
At
on,
the
let-
other end of Marble Way, Somerset, my son's father has a couple of big buildings, and they were packed with cars because there's such a need for it here. And before any of you guys moved in out there, before it really started to get developed, Island Motors used to have a mammoth garage off of Bartlett just before you got to your place. And all the storage cars would go there or out at Holgate's at the airport. So it's sort of a use that's been out there for a long time, because Mark's been down at the other end of the road for, 30 years or something, or 25 years, and he's got those two big barns, and they were full of rent cars going in once and coming out once. So it caused very little trouble down at that end of the street with all the residences that were down there, because there was just no noise. It was just dead storage. So it was something that people thought was a better idea than a full-fledged boat mechanics or whatever else that could have gone on there. So it's worked in other areas, that particular use.
Does that help?
A little bit.
Okay.
Do you have any more questions? Or you want more answers to the same question?
No. No, it just seems in general, that as a neighborhood, we're really hoping for just the whole, what CTEC is, lighter commercial use, like, it just seems so vague and up in the air and open to interpretation that what you might assume is light commercial use is somebody living there.
Well,
So it just,
have you looked at the use chart of RC2? Of RC2?
which it's not RC2 anymore.
No.
I don't really find that applicable.
But what I'm saying is what used to be able to be done there by, under that zoning district. The reason that Andrew and Leslie, devised these lesser intense commercial zones is because they tried to come up with what was already there, like Neil Patterson's shop, which is extremely loud, okay? You have Wraiths, you have the boat buildings, which this abuts. You have Andrew Wings, you have and so Kodalax,
yeah.
and you got whatever is going on with Dom Deming in the last 40 years. There's always something going on there, but it was never like a gigantic, heavy commercial area. You have Marty McGowan's, right? And Mark's. This zoning district got rid of a lot of what could have happened. So we sort of, 6 years ago, when did we do this, Andrew? 6 or 7 years ago. So we pulled back all of the stuff that could have happened that would have, believe me, you wouldn't be happy as a resident, okay? But restaurants, nightclubs, I mean, the stuff is unbelievable. Way past dinner time could be noise, okay? So the uses that are there are they are light commercial. So we have to sort of think about what those things are versus what could have happened with the previous zoning, okay? Cars don't make any noise when they're parked. They're parked for the winter inside. I mean, cars, people, there's a huge need for this issue, for this business. I mean, it's not allowed business. I mean, I don't know what to say. I'm not trying to say that it doesn't have an impact. No, go on.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
My name is John
Yep.
Myers from 14 Sleepy Hollow.
Yep.
And I think the concern that the neighborhood has is the traffic that's going to be going up and down the road. And, not necessarily and yes, we are concerned about the traffic, but more importantly, there shouldn't be any cars being able to be parked on Marble Way.
Well, it's a 60-foot layout, just so you know, Marble Way. So as
it's not 60 feet.
No. The layout, the layout of Marble Way, for you guys should all know this, is 60 feet.
I know it is.
Which is a lot for most roads, okay? I don't know. Ralph Marble, ask him, okay? You're not going to be able to get him on the phone. But it's 60 feet.
Well,
okay? So as a planning board, I mean, there's nothing going to be required here to make the road worse or
wider or whatever. That's not what I'm saying. But there's utility issues that could happen 20 years from now. There are things that could happen that you don't own. There's the width of that road is there on paper for something else to happen. Okay, so there's all these things you have to be taken into consideration. But to get back to your traffic issue, this business really isn't going to make any traffic in comparison to a business that's changing. If this was a mechanic shop, there'd be a lot more problem with something like this. This is just a parking garage in the wintertime, essentially.
So,
and the conditions that we put on a project like this, we can put conditions that an owner of a car can't just come out there, turn the key, and open a door and go get his car. Okay? This is like sort of like cold storage for your antiques or your junk or whatever. It's on Trans or at one of those other places. It has to be by appointment only, or somebody from his company has to come there and get and escort the person to get the car. I mean, it's not a place where people are just like willy-nilly getting their car.
And all 20 cars don't go at one time. You could have one car beginning of May. You could have 4 cars before Memorial Day. So it's really not going to be, okay, open the door, all 20 cars are charging down the street at one time. But we can put conditions on, like they can't park in the street, that they can't do anything after 8 o'clock at night. That's the kind of stuff that you need.
We don't want this random owner, and
Right.
we understand Brian doesn't want people in his garage too, so that's what we're looking for, some
Yeah.
conditions.
And that's stuff that we can put on, we can enforce it, doesn't work, we can put something else on.
I think that the kind of nuisances that the abutters are worried about are entirely acceptable conditions to my client. Noise, light, traffic, odor, all those things are entirely within your purview and acceptable to my client.
HDC hasn't seen the building yet, so.
I wonder if all of the cars in the business model will be able to fit into the garage at once, and if not, where do they go?
That's up to the applicant.
Right, I think.
No outside car parking. That's his problem.
Yep.
It's like an airplane hangar. If you can't fit any more planes in, they don't go in the hangar.
And if there's a 2-bedroom apartment and a 3-bedroom apartment, we're talking 5 spaces. Does whoever's driving the cars around need a parking space as well? Does that make sense?
I mean, it may be somebody taking somebody out there in a car and leaving. They're not staying there. They're coming in to get the car and they're going away.
All right, let's let Mr. Cohen answer that question, because that's the business model I think we've been asking for at this point. So I think you've envisioned to a certain extent there are certain hours of operation. I would really like you to be clear with this, with the neighbors.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So my thought process and intention is I'll coordinate with a caretaker and say, okay, meet me there at 2 o'clock. Meet him there at 2 o'clock, put the car in the garage, and then leave. And then next day, another caretaker, next week. Or a client says, my caretaker's busy, we go pick up my house at 50 Pulpus Road and put it in the garage for the winter. Go 50 Pulpus Road, pick it up, have somebody drive me back to pick up my own car. That's kind of how I envisioned the process working.
So the extra car will be at the house that you're returning the car?
Yeah, I'll need another.
You know what I'm
I'll need
saying?
another
Like,
body. I'll need another
if you're
body.
If you're going to drive a car out of the garage,
all right.
you have to get there in order to drive the car out of the garage.
I'll need a helper to like follow me on one end or the other, either at the garage to take me back to my car, or at the property. There's going to have to be somebody to help me. Yes.
Okay. But that type of use doesn't necessarily need its own parking space. It's a
So the plan is not
All right.
short-term use.
Hold on. I will just respectfully say everything goes to the chair. I don't want to be having 2 conversations, so.
Chair, I think the question was about any intention to park in the road, and I have no intention to park in the road at all. And I hope that there's no condition to do any widening on the road or anything like that, because I think the neighbors like the smaller size, and if it widens, then I only see the traffic increasing. Because I'm only 1 in, 1 out kind of a situation and not 2 passing, I wouldn't want to see it widened either.
Yep.
I mean, this type of use is likely to have 100 to 150 vehicle trips a year. You know, I mean, I can't imagine what would have less vehicle trips for the commercial use. It just happens to be the things that are being stored there are 10 by 20. They're kind of big, but they're quiet. And there's no point in someone having the service if they're going to be going in and out and in and out. That's not what's being offered.
Mm-hmm.
That's not typically how those types of storage buildings work.
It's not a garage to go back and forth.
And just for peace of mind, one more time to reiterate what Linda said earlier, is if it does start taking off in those directions, this board can reopen the public hearing. You can request this board to reopen the public hearing, and we'll get to the root cause of what's happening out there. Ask them to provide definitive data, and then make decisions from there, which may be a range of things. So I think you can take I'd ask you to probably realize you can take some solace in that just because we close everything or we decide that we are going to approve it, it still remains available for you to be able to come back before us and ask us to revisit it if it gets out of control.
So I'm not saying we have, all complaints would come back to the board and be revisited. If
I think probably the first thing we're always going to ask is to, one, make sure you notify the applicant about what's going on. That's just the neighborly process. But if they're turning a deaf ear toward you, then realize there is another mechanism under which you can get some satisfaction that someone else is going to listen to what's going on, and that would be to come back before this board. But certainly the first thing we're going to ask you is, have you tried to work with the applicant to resolve the issue? So does that kind of help?
It does. A lot of the conditions that were mentioned are just concerns of the neighborhood that we wanted noted.
And I think we appreciate that. And that's one of the things why we were looking for a business plan to have been before us tonight, which may have addressed some of these issues straight out forward.
Sure. Mr. Chairman, if I could recommend 2 conditions for your consideration that are generally for more intensive uses, but my client would be happy to accept them as conditions, is, if the board wanted to require that there be a manager's cell phone on file and provided to the neighborhood, that would be acceptable. And I think also if the board wanted to collect a vehicle log, in and out log for a year or two, that's certainly something that we'd be happy to submit.
What did you say?
A vehicle log, so you could see, 10 cars in May and 6 in June, and
So we'd review it again after first.
yeah, whenever you want. I
We
mean,
do that all the
it's typically that's typically for a much more intensive use, but we're happy to provide those logs at an appropriate interval, in January or something for each year, so that the board can see what the actual in and out is.
Yeah, for probably about 2 years worth of time, maybe. Okay. So I'm just going to turn to Andrew and Leslie. Are you getting a good feel for where we're all headed to here? Okay, good. Hi.
Hey, Christopher Scahill, 75 Bartlett Road, 77 Bartlett Road. I just wonder, why are we here when Mr. Cohen is asking the fact that he actually doesn't need to represent the applicant? So I'm just trying to find out exactly why we are here. If Mr. Cohen just stood up and said, well, he doesn't actually need any reliefs.
Yeah, just let me clarify that. I think I'm not entirely sure whether we need the parking relief or not, and we're asking for it just in case. But because it's an MCD, it's not an MCD. I believe the only relief that we need is that storage and warehousing itself requires a special permit no matter what under the use chart. So that's actually what we're here for. And that special permit is not actually relief. It's just an opportunity for the board to apply conditions to that permit, which I think is wise of the board to include in the use chart.
Excellent. Excellent. So we're just here to address the storage situation by the sounds of it. Is that what we're saying?
Well, he's asking for the waiver of the commercial spaces because there are already spaces in.
I'm just trying to understand exactly why we're here. But he's just saying we're not here for a waiver of parking. We're here for a special permit for storage. Is that my understanding?
Yes. Yeah, well,
so let's look at the storage situation. We have 20 cars. Okay, potential of 60 cars because you've got a basement.
No basement, just 30 cars.
There will be a basement. Believe me, there will be a basement. So there's potential of 60 cars. Okay, and let's just go down the road and say that, you know what? A very wealthy man calls you up, and I'm sure none of you care, take it any way, shape or form, a very wealthy man calls you up and says, I'm flying in at 5 o'clock, I want my car. He's your client, and you say, no, I'm not getting your car. One of 60. You as a caretaker is telling your very wealthy client that, no, I'm not going to get your car till 8 o'clock. I'm flying in at 5 o'clock, I want my car. What do they say? No, I'm not getting it? I don't know. I know I caretake. My clients ask me to do something. Typically, you have to do it.
Right. I'd be happy to address both of those points. There is no basement being applied for. If a basement was applied for, it would have to be a new permit before you. So what we are showing is up to 20 cars with no lifts and potentially 28 or 30 cars if you put those lifts in. But
Mr. Cohen, let's just decide on a figure right now.
up to 30.
Great, thank you.
Up to 30 or 20?
Up to 30.
That's why I'm asking you to do that.
So what is it, 29, 25, 30?
Up to 30.
So it's going to be 30.
That's
Just to make
correct,
sure.
sir.
That's the decision?
First of all, hold on a second. Can I say something, please?
Anything
just,
under
you know,
30.
all right.
No,
all
let
right,
me just
let's-
say something. What if there's 30 smart cars? There's room for 30 more. I mean, car sizes change.
Totally agree.
I don't
You're
think
not
we should.
helping.
I don't think we should.
You're not helping.
I don't think we should put a hard number
You shouldn't
unless
be helping.
unless.
Excuse me, hold on. This isn't a free-for-all. Your comments are all going to be addressed to the chair. Thank you. So when Mr. Lowell has the floor, I don't
No,
expect sidebar, but anyway.
No, I'm just saying it's getting, a little arbitrary here with the conversation. I think that the lifts are going to add cars. We know that. To put a basement underneath, to say that the applicant's going to put a basement in when the applicant's saying he's not, we can't. We have to take the applicant at his word. Plus, to put a basement and have the weight of cars on top of the floor would cost the man zillions of dollars. I don't think he's going to be doing that.
Excuse me, Mr. Lowell has the floor. Thank you. I will come back to you.
So I'm just saying, let's just try to just keep the conversation at the realistic point of what the applicant is asking for. I mean, every car is a different size. Okay? So that's all I'm saying.
You said up to 30.
He's up to 30, that's his
Right. If we had all smart cars and it was half empty, we might come back, but that's not what we're talking about tonight. Mr. Scahill's second point I actually think is very important, which is that the caretakers don't have access to the building if those are the people picking up the cars. In the same way that if I get here at 11 o'clock at night and I want to go to Crosswinds and get a hamburger, and I show up and they say the kitchen's closed, they don't care how rich you are, they don't make you a hamburger. The kitchen's closed. And this is just another business. I bet Chris would.
Let me just comment on that, because that's not necessarily true.
I take it back. I'm sure Chris would. But we expect the board to have hours of operation limitations, and that those would be respected. And if they're not respected, then we would expect to be dragged before the zoning enforcement officer and the board for not following the rules. And so the great thing about this facility is that because it's essentially long-term dead storage, nobody is just showing up to get their car. These are people mostly from off-island who are coming in on planes or boats. They're making logistical travel arrangements. They know well in advance when they're getting here. They're going to have plenty of notice. I'm not putting my car there and going back and forth every day. These are people who know when they're coming well in advance.
Okay. Do you have anything else, sir?
No, I just want to verify this. So there's going to be a maximum of 30 cars parked there?
That is
correct?
according to Mr. Cohen, that is what we are going to be presented with.
If the commission wants to put that restriction on, that's an acceptable restriction, and if it turns out we want to do something different later, we would have to come back to the board.
And I, for one, sitting on this board, think there's a great deal of prudency just to start with the equation, because I agree with you. We've heard 20, we've heard 28, 29. That's why I think having an upper number at this point just to start with doesn't mean he can't come back and reopen. But that at least gives us a threshold to start with.
Absolutely.
Okay, so that's we're all hearing 30 now.
Tremendous. So there'll be 30 cars. And when Mr. Sullivan, and I dearly enjoy Mr. Sullivan's company, and I wish him nothing but the best with this venture, and I'm sure he'll do exceptionally well. When Mr. Sullivan does actually do very, very well, the requirement for more cars will be inundated. He will be inundated with people that are looking for storage. Inundated, as he knows, and that's why he's doing it, and I truly wish him the best somewhere else. I truly believe that this road, Marble Way, is nothing like Young's Way. Nothing whatsoever. Nothing like Young's Way was before Young's Way was developed in any way, shape or form. So to use Young's Way as an example of how this road is going to go is not the right example.
Yeah.
And if we could possibly present another situation, that would be great. That is similar to this. Does anybody know of one? Yeah, I'm looking for a comparison other than Young's Way. I'm just looking to see something where a gentleman called Billy Cassidy was forced to develop this in a family fashion, and did an incredible job and went through an awful lot of hardship to develop this in a family fashion. And we're standing here now saying, what a waste of his time and your time, because now the family fashion has gone. You would not call Young's Way a family environment.
Left side of the road is.
No, it never was. Never was. Maybe 50 years ago before I got here. But 30 years ago it wasn't. And nothing in comparison to what has gone on down there. So I'm asking, is there another area?
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, please.
I think that question is getting a little bit irrelevant here. The zoning, this particular area, as was already explained, was zoned commercial on one side, residential on the other side. That existed way before any other development.
That's right. I live on it.
There was a discussion before the board that would have put way more houses. The road was going to be paved at that point. I mean, there's a discussion back and forth. Should the road be improved or should the road not be improved? But it's becoming like we don't want the road improved and then we don't want anything else to happen there. RC2 would have allowed significant residential density. It would have allowed retail, restaurant, all kinds of other options that have all been scaled back. Every one of them has been scaled back.
Yeah.
So I think the application before you for dead storage is highly different than some of the other applications for standard commercial that we have. It certainly doesn't bring the uses were picked for CTEC to reduce the amount of customers and other activities coming on.
Mm-hmm.
And from what they've just explained, it seems like it's one of the most benign uses that I can think of. So I don't know what this continuing. There are situations across Nantucket where there's residential on one side and commercial on the other. Sparks Avenue is a good one. The people that live on Sparks Avenue have a bunch of commercial use across the street.
And as you'll see, they've all moved.
Well, I know, and I'm no fan of that, but that zoning pattern existed, was put in place in 1972, and that's what we have to work with.
Andrew, so commercial is going to be wherever the commercial is left on Nantucket, and we've squeezed it into oblivion. There's going to be, where the commercial ends, there's going to be residential across the street. There's no other way to do it unless you end it at the water. So somewhere, somehow, somebody's residences are going to be across from the tail end of a commercial zone, because what goes in between a residential and a commercial zone? A street. So it's going to exist, and it's going to exist in these pockets of commercial that still exist for everybody on Bartlett Road is year-round. Let's put it that way. Everybody on Macy's and Pine, whatever it is, and Marianne, year-round people. Right next to residences, right next to commercial. Somewhere that line has to be drawn to separate the commercial from the residential, and somebody's going to be on that cusp. Somewhere, everywhere. Boynton Lane, 30 Acres Lane. It's going to be happening all over the place. And what's fortunate is that we've got Dimmicks on Bartlett, across on the other side of Bartlett from you guys. And he could have gone all commercial. It could have been a real squirrely in there. And he has agreed to R5 and certain parts of it remaining residential. So those guys are going to be residential on one side of his street, Andrew, and I think it's commercial on the other side. So they have to be next door to, somebody has to be that one across the street from the end of the residential commercial thing. So in your case, it's just, it happens to work out that way because it actually developed as commercial properties back in the 80s. When I was at the zoning board, we were doing permits up and down Bartlett Road from Metcalf, for everybody on Bartlett Road, all through the 80s and 90s, before you guys were there, before Ed Dimmick did anything across the street. It just is the way it developed because it was the only affordable commercial land that year-round people could get. So it's developed in a hodgepodge, but it was also residential properties that you guys could afford for whether it's a covenant or not. So it's kind of an interesting mix, but it's a mixed, and it's going to remain a mix to some extent.
Just to give you a point of perspective for the board, I actually live in an RC2 zoning.
You still RC2?
I actually live. Did you rezone it to C-Tech?
Which one?
77 and 75 Bartlett Road.
You're in C-Tech.
It's C-Tech now. I actually purchased that because it was an RC2 zoning. Because I actually like the idea of the fact that you could actually live like with a little bit of commercial next to it and so on and so forth. But I'm not here to argue the fact that C-Tech or RC2 or anything like that. I understand you've done what you've done, but what we're asking for is the fact that we believe that what is applied for by the applicant and by the next applicant will have a serious detrimental effect on the neighbourhood. And anybody that sits here and listens to what's going on and watch what's going on cannot deny that. I'm not saying C-Tech is what it is, or I'm not arguing about the C-Tech, but what is being applied for is detrimental to the area. And as the planning board, one must appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Diane?
I had just a description as being part of a family that stores cars.
Her thing isn't on.
And you have to...
Diane,
Just
turn your
face,
thing on.
it's on. Just face toward the microphone, dear.
Oh,
It's a little hard to
sorry.
hear. That's okay.
When somebody wants a car, there's no way that you're not going to have to take a car or so out to get the car that you want, because that's the way you can load that many cars in. So there will be times when you're going to have a couple of cars outside, just so you can move things around. The second question I had when I was reviewing this stuff before is a question came up about an apartment and people living upstairs on the second floor. If they're up there, then I would not think that the cars could be up on a lift underneath them. I'm not sure, but it just seems like they're going to run out of space. So is there a proposition of having a 5-bedroom living space up on the second floor? They have 2 apartments up there.
Let's just turn to the applicant because they feel as though they can make that work. But go ahead.
There are 2 apartments on the second floor in the plan. One is a 3-bedroom, one is a 2-bedroom. And the plan at the moment with a lift could fit 2 cars on top of each other, like 2 smart cars or 2 sedan type cars, not 2 SUV type cars, and would still fit within the way the designer drew the plan.
And it seemed to be questioned at some time whether that was a legal thing to do. I don't know, because I don't know all the ins and outs of the zoning there. But you can't say that there won't be any cars ever parked out in front of the building, because you're just going to have to be able to move around. It's what you have to do.
I'm happy if the board wants to say that only the residential cars can be parked overnight outside. So then the business cars won't be parked outside overnight. There'll be no exterior storage of, but yes, I'll have to move cars
But
out
you
and
have to
shuffle
move
them
cars
around.
and shuffle them around. You
Absolutely.
don't want somebody to look and say, hey, there are 10 cars out here, because I know what happens.
Yeah, I wouldn't intend on leaving the property with anything out, because the whole concept is that you can give me your car and it'll be inside, weather protected, safe, secure, so I wouldn't leave the site or whomever was helping me with stuff out. The residential spots, they would stay overnight outside.
All set? Sir? Yeah, you've got the floor. You're
My name's
next.
Tom Schroeder. I live directly across the street from the two properties that are being developed and that we're talking about tonight. What I'd like to talk about is I'm a businessman. I support commercial business, and I think the residents here also support the commercial business. And what we're looking at is the potential of taking a neighborhood that's residential and changing it. I understand that it's C-Tech zoning. It used to be RC2. That was 6 years ago. I don't understand why we keep on going back and comparing it. It's not RC2 anymore. It's just C-Tech. Right. So what would help me and everybody here is to clarify what C-Tech is and what we can do to make it so that our residential area is not changed in a way. Why can't we work together? One thing I'd like to know is how many businesses can you have on a piece of property that's C-Tech?
We put that condition on.
Ken, all right, so from a technical perspective, okay, but I'm getting a little concerned with this conversation is tracking to, because I keep hearing we want the neighborhood to be residential. This is C-Tech, which has a commercial component to it.
Okay.
So, and this was approved at town meeting. All right. So, as much as you keep saying we want residential, we want residential, we want residential, and I kind of keep hearing that as an undertone here. Okay. I'm afraid people aren't recognizing what is available to this applicant in a C-Tech zone, which they are in. Mm-hmm. You can't say to the applicant, you're in C-Tech, we will only force you to be residential. That is a possibility. Again, the applicant has that right to make it residential if they want.
Sure.
They have that absolute right. But realistically, they also have rights under the C-Tech zone. And that's where I want to go back to staff.
Right.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, to move this along, I think what we need to be talking about is what are the conditions that need to be put on
Correct.
this, unless the board is considering a denial of this. So the kind of conditions that we've already talked about are no exterior storage. These are all conditions that are enforceable by the zoning enforcement officer. If they're violating them, there's a fine and other things that come along with that. So there's no exterior storage. They've already offered a manager, a vehicle log, the sewer connection to somehow participate in road maintenance, the screening plan if there needs to be any specific details about that. Obviously, there's a lighting plan that they have to comply with about dark skies. There's no parking on Marble Way. We can limit the amount of cars that are there, and 30 seems to be the number you've talked about. The plan does not show a basement, so that would be a condition that no basement would be installed unless they come back. And there's no long-term storage at all outside. The hours of operation, if there needs to be changes to those, that's something you all need to discuss. What other conditions are we talking about?
And Mr. Cohen, I want to be clear at this point. You said your hours of operation are, I think you've already said, I'm just going to have you repeat it for the record.
They're proposed at 8 to 6:30.
Okay, thank you. All right.
I just want to finish up.
Yeah, please.
I think that there's a solution to the traffic problem that we're talking about. All the businesses on Bartlett Road are accessed from Bartlett Road. Mark Williams Storage, the people pass by maybe one residence. We're talking about the whole road of all the residences. Neil Patterson, the whole crew. It all accesses from Bartlett Road. Why can't we find a way to access those two lots from Bartlett Road? And it's possible because there's a driveway that separates two properties and goes right up to the boundary. That's one way. Okay.
All right.
And I just have a couple more things I'd like to say just before I sit down.
Please.
When was the last time you saw a 3-year-old riding a bike down Young's Way?
There's plenty of them. I mean,
No.
Do you have, I'm going to let you finish your line of
Yeah.
question before I get the board re-engaging you back and forth, so please.
I think that another way to help the problem is to limit the number of businesses per lot, and that would help people. Mr. Sullivan's building here is for parked cars. He will put up this building, and the potential down the road of changing the business, yes, it does have to go through the planning board, but you folks may not be here. There may be a board here that's in favor of having 5 businesses in there. That's what the concern is here. So I think the number of businesses would help to limit a number of businesses in a C-Tech zone that's abutting a residential zone.
I think, all right, thank you. I'm going to let staff answer that because this boils into a legal issue.
We can put that requirement that there is a single business, no additional businesses will operate on this particular lot unless the planning board. No, that's not. It has to be addressed on an
individual lot
on the properties.
basis. Right. Right.
But that is a condition that I wouldn't think. Would you object to the condition? No. There be one business operating on the property.
I think parking would also dictate that too. As you add the businesses, more parking would be needed.
I don't have an issue for my existence in the property, but I don't want to limit myself outside of. I'm limited by the C-Tech zoning, so I would prefer to stay within what is by right within the C-Tech zoning.
Right.
But as long as I'm under my special permit, I have no issue with one business at the location.
You can always come back. Everybody under the law cannot be prevented from coming back, no matter how bad the permits were or whatever the permits were. No one under state law can be prevented from coming back, whether it's this owner, whether it's an owner 10 years from now, from coming back to the planning board and asking for modifications to be made to the permit. We can't say you can't do that. Yeah. But for our purposes, we could condition it on one entity on the property. Under this special permit. That's what he's limited to.
I don't have a problem with that condition, except for the fact that it's redundant of the permit that's applied for to begin with, which I don't love unnecessary conditions or redundant conditions, but it's not objectionable because it's true even if you don't say it.
Go ahead.
Okay.
I think
Andrew.
the reason it's not, Mr. Cohen, is that there's certain accessory uses that are allowed and other things that
By
there would
right.
be an agreement not to attach to the special permit. So it's not a permanent restriction on the land, but it is as long as the special permit is in operation.
Sure, that is an acceptable condition.
Ms. McLaughlin, I'm going to go to you because I know you
Chairman,
say you want to leave in a minute.
Depart because of personal reasons. I had one quick comment that the staff has done a wonderful job on this, and they asked 10 questions in here. There are 375 pages. I've read most of them. And I can't find where they have answered those 14 questions.
You just
So
did.
I'd like to leave it at that. I would like to see something on those individual questions, all 14 of them answers by the applicant by the next meeting.
I think Mr. McLaughlin's on the next application that we only have
I
5
think
questions.
you are too.
And I believe I answered them.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Hi.
Good evening. My name is Todd Stout. I'm actually one of those people that benefited from the RC2, small size, affordable. I can appreciate everyone's concerns about that. Not only in developing that small parcel of property, but being beside other businesses that are around small parcels of property and how they affect each other. I just had one quick question about, and I'm not familiar with this ancillary dwelling and these micro houses that they're starting to propose, but I think with some of these buildings that are this big, that this might set a precedent for that to say that in the future there shouldn't be another dwelling added, even though, housing is ultimately a huge issue. And I see these small lots being, small ancillary dwellings being proposed, and people talking about, how to put a little house here on the corner of a property. Mm-hmm. This isn't a lot of ground cover for what's allowed under the C-Tech zoning. So my question is there ever going to be a secondary dwelling put on this property?
CTEC allows up to 4 apartments, and we're only proposing 2. So there would be, but there's no proposal to add any more dwellings, essentially because the septic system and the open space and the parking requirements don't require it. And then since it's not proposed in the application, it would need to come back if that ever were going to happen. It couldn't happen without sewer being put in, and even after sewer being put in, it would have to come before this board. Whereas, a lot of other uses, it would happen by right.
Okay. Anyone else wishing to comment on this? Kevin, good evening.
Hi, everybody. My name's Kevin Dugan. I have a piece of property at 6 Sleepy Hollow. And a lot of the conditions that you folks have talked about tonight, I had written down here to ask you about. So am I correct, though, in understanding that you folks are the ones that put the conditions on? Is that correct? Yes. Okay. As many as you want. And is this the only time to put the conditions on?
You can open the public hearing again.
Put more on. Okay. All right. Can I request a condition of the board?
Sure.
Because this is going to result in more obvious traffic. I don't care if there's 30 cars or 10 cars or whatever. It's going to be more traffic. Okay, we've accepted that. Can there be a condition in there that as a result of one new business, being responsible for the excessive traffic, that they can contribute towards maintaining the road? I mean, I think that's very important and not unreasonable, certainly.
Oh, go ahead.
I'm more than happy to contribute to the road, and if you have a system set up, I'm more than happy to contribute it, and I would be willing to contribute at more than one lot share, if you wanted. Versus if a residential, if you have 12 lots and everybody's doing 1/12, I'd be willing to do 2/12 to represent 2 lots. But if I was added traffic, is that
well? I was more in thinking that the applicant would be responsible for maintaining the road.
By himself?
Yeah. Well, okay. And we keep hearing.
We can do a lot here.
We keep hearing about your relatives' building at the other end of the street, and I walk by there or drive by there every day.
Mr. DeGan, I'm sorry. I don't mean to interrupt you, but I don't want to leave this as kind of like an open-ended type thing. So where are we tracking with the conversation about
Let me finish my sentence and you'll know.
All right, perfect. Thank you.
that?
I'm sorry to have interrupted you.
No problem. So I go by there all the time. I have never, been there 11 years, seen a car inside there except for the fact of a 1942 or 52 Jeep Willys that's in there with a license plate Pack Rat. I just happened to wander in there the other day, and the only other things that I see in those buildings are sailboats. Old, antique, custom-type sailboats. So I'm not sure if that's a good comparison or not, but whether it is or not, I'm just mentioning it.
Kevin, he's doing boats now, which is why everybody's been kicked to the curb, basically, which is why there's a need for more vehicle storage barns, like Holgate's used to be, like Island Motors used to be, which was a mammoth building before and right behind you guys.
Can we kind of
so
get to
things
where
have
we're going
changed.
here? Because we're getting off tangent. Please.
Was that off tangent?
Yeah.
I didn't mean it. I didn't mean it to be.
The sidebar from we were getting off tangent here.
All right.
I'm trying to get us
I didn't mean it to be off
focused.
tangent, God forbid.
Please.
Okay, I guess that's all I have then. But I just wanted to mainly find out who does the condition. And I guess this is you folks.
Kevin, can I ask one question? Do you have a homeowners association out there?
No.
Yes.
No, they don't.
No. You don't.
It was done without one.
See, I think that, and we can't require that to happen, but we've had other areas like Squam.
Yeah.
I know that doesn't fit this, but I'm just using it as a comparison, that they've created a system for maintenance and for what they want the road to be like, in a sense.
idea.
Like, that road is so bumpy, I don't go down Marble Way on purpose because it's terrible. You guys like it terrible, but you want it maintained at the same time, then maybe you guys could get together with what you want done and have a kind of a maybe today's version of a homeowner's some degree, but we can't require the applicant to do that. But I think that would be a smart move in this area's with concerns with what's going on over there in commercial on one side and residential on the other.
I strongly agree with you.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Cohen, briefly, sir.
Yeah, just to be responsive, obviously my client doesn't want to be responsible for 100% of maintenance of the road, but if the commission wanted to require grading of the road before receiving a CO or something, that kind of condition would be more than acceptable. Obviously, we want to do it post-construction.
Absolutely, thank you. Did you have, please?
Rob Morgenstern, 1 Marble Way. Just to make this quick, I agree with everything my neighbors say. I have the same concerns. I realize Brian's business is low impact, but I think this all stems from recent developments in the next applicant. We're all, we feel like we've just been bombarded on Marble Way. And I know it's, C-Tech on one side, residential on the other, but it's still affecting the residential. And one of the main bullet points in the Planning Board's charter is to protect the quality of residential districts. So I think that's kind of where everyone has concerns. So I know it's one side is C-Tech, one side's residential, but we're still highly affected by both these businesses. That's it.
Okay. Is there anyone else in the audience who'd like to comment on this? Okay.
I think that's a point well taken, but we also conversely have to protect the limited commercial that we have left and try to get commercial and residential to live side by side. So rather benign uses or low-key uses type of thing next to a residential, but we have to say it's commercial here and it's residential here, and somewhere that's going to meet, and not happily sometimes. So that's the dichotomy here. We're trying to come up with a bunch of conditions to really tighten this thing up so it can live quietly next to a bunch of residential properties without taking away the rights to have a commercial property. So this is what we're struggling with at the moment. We're not ignoring everything everybody says about their residences. I mean, I live out next to Augie's Junkyard. So we're not ignoring the fact that that exists, but we have a reality here that it's C-Tech, and they have a right to a commercial business there. It's what do they have, what's going to work the best for you guys and for the commercial to coexist, basically. That could be 500 pounds of trees every square inch.
Excuse me. Thank you. I'll recognize you, but it doesn't mean you get to pop up and just say, I will recognize you.
I would just like to say, since Sleepy Hollow, can the conditions for Marble Way be applied to Sleepy Hollow too, as it's the only, like, no parking, as it's the only road that can be accessed from Marble Way? We just don't want any Marble saying, oh, we couldn't park here, but we can park here. That's all, as one of the conditions.
They can't park anything off the property that belongs to this property stays on the property.
Perfect.
They're not going to get around not parking on Marble Way by going across the street and parking
we
on
wanna make
Sleepy
sure.
Hollow. Absolutely not.
Okay.
And as owners of Sleepy Hollow, you have the right to have the car towed
Okay.
if somebody pulls that stunt.
Okay,
You have complete control over your road.
okay. Thank you.
Come on down. Come on down. Thank you.
Tom Schroeder, 9 Marble Way, right across the street from the development. I just wanted to say that everybody in this room, I think, should have an opportunity to tell or talk about their concerns. It seems as though that when I've come up, we're getting off track, and when Kevin's gone up, we're getting off track of where you'd like this meeting to go. I don't think that's fair to us as residents. I mean, you interrupted Kevin saying that we're getting off track here and there, and he was talking about something relevant to what we are addressing.
Mr. Schroeder, for the record, I'm going to correct what you've just said at this point. It was actually one of my board members who was tracking us onto a tangent. When Mr. Dugan was up, I wanted to make sure his concern was being addressed about what the applicant would be willing to do with the roadway. And I'm afraid, again, I wanted to make sure that what was happening with him was being addressed. So respectfully, that's where I was coming from at this point. And I'm sorry if you misunderstood that, sir.
Okay.
But I haven't been here asking you guys to come forward just to move you along.
Sure.
So I'm going to take a little bit of exception to where you're heading with at this point, because I do take that part of this job very seriously, that the public does have a right to ask certain questions of things. They absolutely do.
Okay. I
All
just
right.
wanted to state that everybody here should have an opinion and be able to speak.
And I think, sir, and respectfully, sir, I think I've been asking for those. Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to comment on this? Okay. Board members or staff, did you have anything else, Andrew? I'm sorry, I just saw you pulling the microphone forward. All right, so what is it that this board would like to do at this point? Actually, I'd like staff, I think staff has done that once, and since they're the ones that are going to be composing this, if you need to hear it again, I'm going to ask them to do it.
But just add the one about the grading before the CO, because that one, you didn't bring that up the first time.
No, I've got that. So where are you, the board, where are we headed with this?
This is what I'm trying to ascertain from the board right now.
I think you should approve it with all these conditions.
Well, what you need to do at this point is, if you want more public testimony, we can certainly do that. I haven't seen anyone else step forward at this point. Okay. So, board members, you've got to kind of make a decision here about where you'd like to track this. Andrew, I just have one question for you.
Yep.
Since Mr. McLaughlin left, this is a special permit. Does that require 2 alternates to sit on this to make a board of 5? Or, yeah, okay, I just wanted to be clear. I'm sorry.
So anyway, conditions that we've talked about tonight is that there's no exterior storage of any kind. There's no long-term vehicular storage outside. It's only for, as Ms. Coombs brought up about
Getting a vehicle out.
moving the vehicles back and forth. There is the manager, well, other than the apartments, we're talking about the commercials. So the vehicle log, the participation in the road maintenance, so either that's an annual grading or a contribution is typically what we would ask for. So either they conduct an annual grading or make a contribution to the group.
But Andrew, in that section, put down that before he gets a CO, he will grade the road after construction. And before the CO, so that road is put back to a reasonable state.
And also, how far to the entrance to Somerset? You don't want to go any further.
Which direction am I going? Am I going Bartlett to the property, or am I going?
Gesundheit.
I would say Bartlett.
Going Bartlett to the entrance.
Of the property?
Right. We'll put that in. The screening plan that is shown talks about a combination of different material, different species and trees. Does the board need anything further? Is there fencing of any kind being proposed, or security fencing, or anything like that?
I wasn't planning any at this time. My intention was Leland cypress. So it's thick, full, and year-round.
Okay. So the lighting we've talked about must comply with our local bylaw. There's no parking on any of the streets, Marble Way, Sleepy Hollow, or outside of the facility, or in the right-of-way in between. So all parking is on-site only.
Yes.
There's no more than 30 cars. There's no basement to be constructed.
Sir?
Does that include like a utility room?
No, he meant the vehicle storage.
Okay, I just want to make sure I can do a utility room for furnace and.
No commercial use.
There's no further, there's basically one business being operated out of the site, and no additional businesses or housing units allowed under the special permit.
Management, Andrew, I have management written down here.
The manager is provided. The hours of operation are 8 to 6:30. No vehicles will be retrieved outside of those hours. I miss anything?
Did we put a condition in?
The sewer connection.
Give them a s-
Well, I just want to clarify, the residential units are not restricted by the one business thing. They don't have to be employees of that business. It's only one business for the commercial use, right?
So the only other conditions that Andrew didn't mention were maintaining the vehicle log,
Yep.
that the planning board will review the status of the special permit after 1 year.
Is it 1 year or 2? That was my question.
We've traditionally done 1 year and then extended it for a year and stopped if everything's going well. That the applicant agrees to connect to sewer when it's available. And that was it.
Okay.
So where did we end up on the grading of the road? It was one time before the CO?
Just
Once before the
step.
CO, and that you would contribute to the maintenance account for the neighborhood. Annually. You'd contribute annually.
I'm happy to participate in whatever they come up with.
The requirement would be to participate in whatever private road maintenance organization is formed. That would be fine.
Okay. Is there anything that we haven't covered at this point? I think that's the list of conditions. I see Mr. Cohen saying we're there.
They all work?
Yep. So again, the question is, do you want to keep this open? And I'd like to know if you are going to keep this open as to why. Otherwise, what is the pleasure of the board in terms of acting on this application?
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Do I hear a second? Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor, please. Oh, I'm sorry. Hold on. I need to activate 2 people for this. Carl, I'm going to put you on this. Di, I'm going to put you on this, okay? All right, thank you. I'm sorry. I wanted to make sure. I didn't want to forget that. All right, so the motion is made and seconded to close the public hearing. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have it unanimously, and the pleasure of the board at this point.
I'll make a motion to approve this application subject to all of those conditions.
Okay. And do I hear a second to that?
Put in,
Ma'am?
it's going to be reviewed
Yes.
In 1 year.
Yes.
at this time.
Yes.
1 year.
1 year from opening operation.
Okay. Are there any other questions from the board? Not hear anything else. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed? Ayes have unanimously. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, next application before us at this point is 64-15, which is Russell Simpson on 6 Marble Way for the applicant. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. So we are back again after pulling our first application. I've kind of felt the impact from the owners, their concerns, their traffic issues, just a nice neighborhood scenario. So we've removed the 2 apartment buildings that we applied for with the HDC, taken our second building and turned it into a contractor shop like the first, which was HDC approved along with screening and several other conditions that I recall. So to go over some of the questions that you guys emailed, I apologize for not doing it earlier. The driveway width will be 15 feet. The traffic, parking calculations, drainage calculations, and site plan will all be revised to address the issues that you guys have with those questions. Hours of operations are simple. Doors closed between 5 p.m. and 8 a.m. Otherwise, we would follow all bylaws in terms of noise ordinance. The lighting plan, we're happy to subject ourselves to meet the town bylaws as well, to keep it friendly, nice, lights pointing towards the ground. The open space, I believe we have a little above 30%, about 33%. And then question number 10, the plan does not provide the existing condition of the vegetation, but we do have an HDC approved screening which is pretty aggressive and removes I would say 85% view of the property, unless you're directly in front of the driveway.
And a fence. I need to get something clear.
Was there anything else, sir?
No, not at all. Just questions if you have any.
I think we're going to have a few. Go ahead.
Russell, did you say you removed the other mixed-use building?
So we weighed the rewards or the cost benefit, and it just didn't seem applicable in terms of cost and expense versus what you get from another shop. And then after hearing about all the neighbors and the complaints and the issues that it was bringing up, I'm just simply moving to get away from the tenants that would be there, bring the extra traffic, nighttime concerns, and just make it a little easier design, a little easier to deal with, basically making it an 8 to 5 operation only.
In the shop area?
That's correct.
And the building that you're proposing for the shop is the same building that the HDC approved?
So I'm applying for 2 buildings. We do not have a site plan yet because we haven't gotten that far. The second building that was approved, building number 2, which was the 2 office spaces and 2
Right.
apartments, I'm going to move to change those to contractor shop space, just like building number 1, which was HDC approved.
But the building number 1, is that changing?
That's not changing, moving, or doing anything other than what you've already approved on the HDC board.
Okay. So there's no residences on the property at all anymore?
They've all been eliminated.
Okay. So how many shops would be on the lot total now? 5?
There would be, correct, 5 garage spaces. I would propose to have between 2 and 3 businesses there, including my own. And I would be happy to be limited to that.
So 3 businesses, including yours. So 2 other guys and you?
Correct. And it may be as little as 2. The cost analysis would have to be done to figure that out.
Okay.
Do you have more questions?
And all the parking is going to be provided on site?
The parking, correct, will be provided on site, and it will relatively remain the same. We probably would lose a space or 2 at that point and gain more open space or more grassy areas, given that the apartments are not there and we're not required to have as much.
And the office space was 1 per 200, and the garage space is 1 per 900?
That's correct.
Yeah, okay.
So what's the total? 6 garage bays.
Okay. That's it for me at the moment.
Anyone else on the board have any questions at this point?
So the reason you're here instead of being, one more, the reason you're here instead of as a by right is because you are, instead of 3,920, you're going to be what, 4,000 and change?
I think the previous HTC application was 3,700 and change, and we've moved to 4,050. So just slightly larger shop space than would have been provided by the residential, commercial, mixed-use building that was there.
Okay. That's the only thing I was missing. Okay.
So a much smaller building than the first approved.
C-Tech, Andrew, is a 40%, 50%, 40%?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. You all set now? Yep. Anyone else have any questions at this point? So I guess on the site plan, I'm not seeing a parking configuration at the moment.
It's there. The application process was done quickly, and we may not have it in there. But we've done an extensive study with a fully engineered site that meets all the criteria by the state, the town, and we just simply have to provide it.
Andrew, I'm just going to...
I'm looking at
I'm not
page
sure.
215, which is that that's your site plan, the concept design. I mean, I can see it's looks like there's landscaping, and does that pretty much show it?
So what you're looking at is what was HTC approved, and that does clarify everything. It would probably change, one spot, two spots, and the locations of everything would remain relatively the same.
The ACC plan is much more detailed than that.
Yeah, because I'm not seeing any of that.
We don't have the ACC plan.
Well, I can see that there. It looks to me like there's 3 new trees in the front and some sort of grass.
The driveway has shifted, and there's a gate on the driveway.
A gate, which is discussed. A 6-foot board fence is running along the back property line. Is that right?
That's correct. I think Andrew has the actual HTC plan in his hands.
I don't have it in my file.
Because it shows parking, vegetation, screenage, fences, driveway.
Short of staff bringing something, there's nothing in our packet to.
It's page 215 of your packet. It's
Right,
very,
and-
very light.
Yeah, because I can.
I know the ACC plan, that this isn't, it was very detailed and very specific.
Yeah, because I can't make heads or tails out of this plan when I look at it. It's that light.
You can see it here, then it goes that way, and then the trees are right here, and then there's screening here, and there's a fence here. And there's a gate up there.
So, how many parking spaces total?
I think right now 7 were proposed, and I think it would move to 5 or 6.
I would really keep this in.
At that point, we don't need handicap, and that would be removed. That's 2 spaces essentially.
All right, so just for the board's edification, how many parking spaces are we talking about?
5.
5, okay. And if we were to, with 3 shops that you're going to have in there, you're saying 2 to 3. We'll go to 3 at the moment, just so we have a number to work with.
Okay.
Traffic generation?
We can provide that report once it's done by the civil engineer.
Okay, because I think given just some of the responses from the neighbors and stuff as well, and not having a good sense on the site plan, I think as one member of the board, I'd like to have that information before making a decision on the application, because I think that's kind of integral. Andrew, do you have information from Ed Pesci on drainage? Or is that something that still has to be worked out as well, too?
No.
Go ahead.
Right, so that's not been required? No.
No, we haven't done it.
No, we don't have Ed Pesci reviewing this.
Okay, so is the drainage adequate, I think, is where we're going to boil down to here, since that was also a question that was raised in the staff report.
It is gravel. I can actually elaborate on that. The previous
Please.
plan that required the 2 buildings, we had a complete engineered plan that showed parking, drainage, vegetation, space requirements for handicap. It absolutely met all state and town criteria without any question. It was a pretty extensive plan. I do apologize for not having it in. I will lecture the applicant.
Okey doke. Open space for the project, I'm not quite.
33 right
33%.
now, and if parking goes down, it would move up slightly.
Okay. And so, Andrew, do we require a site plan that's going to have setbacks, et cetera? Or do you have that in some iteration through other board applications such as the HTC?
Yep. Typically, you're required to sign a final site plan within a
Okay.
certain time period. So at this draft stage, we have this, I guess, which has been submitted to the HTC. So if there's any further changes, our requirement is typically that a final site plan is submitted and signed within a certain period of time.
Okay. All right. Anything else from the board? Do you have anything from your perspective, sir?
Basement areas in these buildings, will basements be built?
None proposed, and I don't plan on it. Just shop space.
You heard the conditions that we just put on Sully's.
I was paying attention.
Was there anything in there that got weird for your particular
The only thing
thing?
that conflicted was they were trying to limit the number of businesses being on the property, and clearly I would not agree with that. But the rest of it, I was pretty happy with what they had to say.
Okay.
Happy to improve the road. Big screening, like the HTC has already approved. Aggressive screening, if you look at it, when you do get the site plan.
So no problems with parking on Marble Way. And you did say
None.
3 businesses, right?
Yeah, if somebody parks there, I'd call the tow truck. I want a nice, friendly neighborhood.
I understand. And working with the homeowners association for roadway maintenance.
Happy to do that.
Everything except for the one permit.
I'm sorry?
Everything but one business. He said he could do all the rest of it.
Mr. Chairman, just to be clear, though, if you would agree to no more than 3 businesses?
Correct.
Okay.
I would not want to be limited to the one
right.
that the neighbors asked for was Solly's property. 3 would be my number.
Okay.
Including my own.
Right.
Okay.
And you're okay with the hours? It was 8 to 6:30.
8 to 5 is what you said.
I said doors shut from 5 to 8 p.m. or
Okay.
5
I
p.m.
got
to
it.
8 a.m.
I got it. So
Meaning
8 a.m.
doors
to
open
5.
during the day.
I just have one question.
Yeah.
Having written, Leslie, Andrew, having written or sat on all of the special permits on Bartlett Road when I was with the ZBA, the one thing that they did require, because there were scattered older residences in the neighborhood, stars, people like that, was that when equipment was being run, like planers or saws or something along those lines, the doors were closed and the buildings, I believe Todd had to do that, the buildings were ventilated. So there wasn't what's going on Perry Lane when everybody's got their shop doors open and they're running power equipment in like 9 different shops. They did ask that when heavy equipment was being used inside, like shop and milling and stuff like that, if that's what's going to be going on here, that the doors be closed to minimize the noise and that they just be air conditioned or ventilated somehow. Is that something that's possible?
I'm happy to comply with that. That's not that big a deal. Just so the board can hear it again, the primary use of these is really, it's an office with a contractor that sits on his desk all day and with the option to use it as a shop. My business would certainly not have men there 8 hours a day or trucks coming in and out. The men would not stop there every morning. They would go directly to their job site. And I'm looking for applicants or renters that are going to be in the same scenario so that I don't have to listen to noise because I'm going to be sitting in there in an office and trying to think and compute numbers, and I just want to be realistic.
Mr. Chairman, just to clarify, the relief that was requested was for a contractor shop, and that's where a contractor, has their office and stores their materials. It doesn't include exterior storage, and it does not include your typical carpenter shop. That would be separate relief for light manufacturing, which the applicant did not request.
So that was actually something I'm thinking when he's bringing up this milling stuff. So we have that under our uses. Light manufacturing is what we would call like thickness planers,
Yes.
joiners, things that make a lot of noise, right?
Yeah. If you don't mind, I'll just read the definition of contractor shop so everyone understands.
Cool, that's good.
It's an establishment used for the indoor repair, maintenance, or storage of a contractor's vehicles, equipment, or materials, and may include the contractor's business office, but which does not use any exterior storage area. So that's the only thing that was requested.
Yes.
Again, if any changes occur, things start happening there that are fabrication for off-site purposes and milling and things like that. If he's just limiting it to contractor shop, anything that goes beyond that, coming back here, because that's a separate special permit.
Are there any other questions from the board or from staff? Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is a public hearing. I'm going to open it up at this point, and I'm just going to ask you to raise your hand. I'll acknowledge you at certain stages. Here. Hi.
Good evening, Dawn Dugan, and I own a piece of property at 6 Sleepy Hollow. I'm very concerned about 3 businesses on this piece of property, again, with the road, and owning land on Sleepy Hollow. The only means of egress from Sleepy Hollow is onto Marble Way. Mr. Simpson keeps referring to his HDC approval, but just for the record, that is an appeal right now. And also, I think at the moment he's currently in violation of CTEC with what he has on the property now. So before you consider approving what he's proposing, you know, we might want to address the fact that he might be currently in violation with what he's got on the property now. Thank
Okay,
you.
Great, thank you. Hi again.
Hi, Erin Myers, Sleepy Hollow. A question about exterior storage. What are dumpsters considered? Because there's currently dumpsters and dump containers on the property. So I was wondering, where do the dumpsters fit into the storage? Well, there's 11 trucks, 4 dumpsters, 2 dump containers, all on the property right now.
And Andrew, Leslie, I hate to put you on the spot. Go ahead.
That's probably something that should be clarified in the decision. I would say if it's a dumpster for the business and they're using it, that's one thing. But if it's a dumpster that's moving from job site to job site, or they're renting them to people, that would be exterior storage.
And contractor trailers, what are those considered?
We haven't typically considered like vehicles to be exterior storage.
Well, so if there's
if
a
it's-
trailer that moves from a job with ladders all over it that just doesn't move, what is that considered?
Ken, I'm going to
Yeah.
turn to staff, if you don't mind. It's a good question. I just want, right, they're the technical.
Yep.
That's the new shop on wheels now. So
Yep.
we have to figure out how to word that.
And how does it get included in like parking, or where does it go? Because I
would
don't think
park,
it fits in a bay.
So, Andrew, Leslie, I'm not sure you necessarily have an answer to it, but it might be something to consider for the decision.
Have you ever considered in any board, either board's parking of your work truck as storage?
Shed.
Or anything attached to it as storage and warehousing? It's moving someplace.
When we consider, like, when this stuff comes up, like the stuff at Tomahawk and then, the new project over there, I mean, in the old days, traditionally, carpenters would have their ladders on the sides of the shop with these little things sticking out, and they just hang stuff. They have piles of shingles and stuff left over from other job sites. Today, things don't work that way as much as like that today as they used to. The trailer that you're speaking to is like today's shop on wheels that goes from job to job. They set up their stuff. I mean, I've had that in my little stupid stuff I've done at my house. Guy shows up and all of a sudden he's got a shop in my yard. You know what I mean? For a day. I think that would be considered in the parking calculation aspect, but not storage, because it's in a contained, and that's would be my interpretation. Because if we put that in a condition, it sets a precedent, excuse me, for other shops where all of a sudden these trailers that everybody seems to have all of a sudden turns into something that it wasn't intended to be. So I think we need to, that's something that we need to look at, though. I think you're bringing up a good point, but I do believe that it would be considered a parking space.
Okay, so
for
you
sure.
have a dumpster for your job that comes and goes?
No,
but-
I was just strictly talking about the little trailer thing.
Yeah.
The dumpster thing, I don't think that what Mr. Simpson has on that property right now is staying there, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And I went over there yesterday before the game.
Yep.
Yeah, you're right. Everything that you said is true. What's over there right now?
And then my other question was, when you say doors close, does that mean work stops, or the doors just close and you can continue to work?
I think he meant hours of operation
Okay.
means.
I just want to clarify that. 'Cause
Yeah.
hours of operations and shop doors
What he
closed
meant.
could mean two different things.
If there was any activity taking place inside the shop, the door would be closed so the noise would not emanate from the building.
Okay.
But he hasn't asked for a fabrication and construction.
Correct. So
Right.
it's strictly storage in an office.
The term doors closed
All right.
happened twice. When
Let me-
he mentioned 5 to 8,
Mm-hmm.
doors closed.
Yep.
What Linda was talking about was equipment running,
Yeah.
noise, doors closed in the daytime.
Yep.
With it open
Yes.
for business, but doors closed. That's what she was talking about.
And then my one other question was, is it 5 or 6 bays? Because I heard someone say 5, but in the application it says 6.
Mr. Simpson?
That could be a technical error on the designer side. I think 5 is fine.
They have
And I would
three-
agree to
Well,
that.
It's
Can the
two different
applicant answer
numbers.
the question? Thank you.
I'm happy to agree to 5.
Okay.
Thank you.
The 3 that we approved at the HTC and then the 2 in the other building.
Well, in this one right here, it says 2 3-paid garages,
Yeah.
just on the agenda notes. So I just wanted to know.
Thank you for clarifying that, sir.
You're welcome.
Did you have anything else?
Nope. So we can, as a condition, it's 5, not
Yep.
6. Just want
5.
to clarify.
5 is
Okay.
what, yes, 5 is what Mr. Simpson has proposed to
Okay.
us.
All right. So you guys aren't 100% sure about the trailers and that stuff, so I don't really feel like I got that answer because it's not been addressed ever. I'm sorry, I just didn't
Well,
really-
it was never.
Let me
Go
let me
ahead.
turn
Let
to
them
staff,
answer.
if you don't
Okay.
mind, because they're the ones who generally have to deal with the legal ramifications of certain decisions that are going to come forward at this point.
So, Mr. Chairman, I think we're in agreement that if there are going to be trailers on the site, that the location of them should be shown on the site plan, and perhaps the total number of them should be limited. And just to touch on the closed door issue, I think that's at this point irrelevant because we're not talking about light manufacturing. We're talking about a contractor shop, which is different.
Thank you.
Does that help?
Yes.
Good. Okay. Anyone else wishing to comment on this? Todd?
My name's Todd Stout. Would be in not a direct abutter, but close enough, and have dealt with the issue of having people building the buildings as big as they can under some exemption that was understandable at some time and some place, and then putting contractor shops in there, and there's no the oversight of that, and if it's going to be 3 businesses and there's 5 bays, inevitably there's space for 5 businesses. So the oversight of that and the design of the buildings brings that into question. The other problem I have, and I'm not saying this about you or your crew, is the number of bathrooms in these buildings should also be factored in. That the way that they're designed, there should be common bathrooms, or there should be bathrooms for every unit that's rentable. I had that problem in the past with people actually using the driveway right below my door to my home as a good spot to use the bathroom. And, as funny as it sounds, it still to this day may occur. So we might want to just consider those things that unfortunately do happen. And everyone has great concerns about the number of businesses, the number of trucks, the number of, and by not limiting, and I think 2 is a more reasonable number, but that's just based on what I see next door to me. I don't know where that line is drawn between light manufacturing and carpentry shop, but I think it's a very gray area. And to condition a space that's going to be used for machinery, especially with the proximity of residences, and we required it of a cycling studio that's going to be abutting him. That's kind of a very questionable. The ability to discern between light manufacturing and carpentry in this day and age. I know people that do light manufacturing out of their trailers on job sites, theoretically. So you know, to not take this into consideration now, knowing that at any point a contractor could develop one of these small spaces, or they're actually large. They're, you know, twice the size of my shop, which I, you know, manufacture in. I would ask the board to take that into consideration. I mean, it's a very gray area. And I use the same machines as the contractor does. I just happen to be honest about what I'm providing, producing, and putting out of my shop. So.
Well, we also gave you a ZBA approval for light manufacturing, fabrication for off-site premises. We gave you the whole shebang when you came in.
Right, and I did condition the space and went through.
Close the doors when you're running.
And I have never gotten a complaint, and
Right.
I have, you know, my neighbors, you know, here in the building. So, thank you.
So I can address some of those concerns.
Yep.
Right now, all the doors for the garages proposed -1 are pointed at each other within the property, at each opposing building. In terms of the use, if it's going to be a problem or an issue, I'm happy to amend the application for light manufacturing and storage so that there are no questions, concerns, or issues or arguments later. It would just be easier to do it now. And then further, the bathrooms, I believe we proposed 1 bathroom per shop or per building. I can't remember, one or the other, but I'm happy to take whatever recommendation you'd like.
That's okay, but go ahead, Andrew. Because it raises kind of an issue all of a sudden.
Mr. Chairman, we can't add on
Thank
uses
you.
that we haven't advertised. And,
Right.
And, yep.
For a contractor shot. So if there is going to be...
And I just want to be clear, there's definitions of light manufacturing in the bylaw, and Leslie read you the definition. It's not
Correct.
what individual people think. It's about the language in the bylaw and what the zoning enforcement officer enforces.
Mhm.
So there is no light manufacturing allowed on the site. If it happens, it's subject to an enforcement order and a $300 a day fine. So, and whatever else you put in your, if you are inclined to grant this and put conditions on it, those are all part of, you know, what's going to be allowed. I think from the testimony you heard, that you would want to write this as tightly, if not tighter, than the other application that you heard. So that would mean no accessory uses without further relief from the board. There would have to be specific, the applicant would have to come back and ask for changes to that.
So just to be clear,
Go ahead.
there's
Buddy.
no light manufacturing or fabrication for off-site purposes without coming back here.
It would require an additional special permit from the board.
And then
it
we'd go
cannot
through
be
the doors
modified.
closed and the air conditioning and the whole 9 yards, so you may just do the air conditioning up front. But it may require all of that stuff, so if any equipment is running, doors closed. Building is soundproofed. That's what Todd had to do, and that's what the other guys over there had
I
to
think
do.
Mr. Simpson has a question for us, or needs clarification. So please.
So I understand all of this. Quick scenario, if I have my doors shut and we're running a shaper or a table saw or anything that Mr. Stout uses, and we're not breaking the decibel bylaw, are we under or are we under contractor shop at this point still?
No. You've gone into another use category that has not been.
You have to notice that separately.
Yeah.
And you'll come back and get a modification of this one.
No machinery whatsoever. So what's the point of the doors being shut?
Well, they're not
That-
now. Leslie said it was irrelevant because we've gone past that point.
Okay.
We don't have that part of the application.
So that's not in the application.
No, not right now.
I was told we had F1B and S1 uses applied for. Is that not the case?
Mr. Chairman, those are under the building code, so maybe he's designed the building for that, but that's not what was applied for under zoning.
Okay.
Okay. So are we clear, or?
We are clear?
Okay.
Yes. If I want to change use for light manufacturing, I will reapply.
Right, you'd have to come back. For
I understand.
Okay, great, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, the public hearing is still open, so, yeah, please.
Tom Schroeder, 9 Marble Way. I just want to clarify what kind of noises we would hear under this application under a contractor's shop.
Can you give me an example of noises that we would hear?
Somebody driving in and out.
Just vehicles and people?
You don't hear anything from his office.
No machinery whatsoever.
Yeah.
We just clarified.
Storage, of equipment or things moving to another site.
Right.
Parking. That's all that's here right now.
I also wanted to state that we've got two businesses or two properties side by side on Marble Way, and I think under C-Tech zoning, I think one business per lot makes sense for the area. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Anyone else wishing to comment on this? Hi. Hello again. Please.
Hi, Leah Cabral, 7 Marble Way. We live directly across from Mr. Simpson's lot, and I was just wondering if the hours of operation 8 to 5 are Monday through Friday or Monday through Saturday or Sunday.
Good point.
6 days a week?
So
which days?
Monday through Saturday?
Monday through Saturday.
Monday through Saturday? Okay. I would propose Monday through Friday because that's when most people work. We live directly across from him, so our room is right there. So the noise, and then also for parking. If he already has 11 trucks there, I'm not sure where they're going to go. In addition to another contractor being there.
We just meet all the requirements once we're done building.
So how many parking spots are proposed?
5.
Okay, but he already has 11 cars, so just...
Yeah, Mr. Simpson, go ahead.
Again, we would just comply once we're done with construction.
So there wouldn't be 11
No.
on the property?
No, I have 5 parking spots and I would use them adequately.
Inside the garage?
Correct.
Go ahead, Andrew.
Mr. Chairman, through you, so could I ask, what is the current use? What are the 11 vehicles there for now?
I don't know that there's 11 vehicles. That might be slightly exaggerated, but we do have a dumpster truck with dumpsters there, which is what they're referring to.
I don't believe what's sitting there right now belong to you.
There is a couple other pieces of equipment from Ted Stroni, who is using some of my equipment right now.
Which would be removed
Of course.
and taken back to Ted Land.
He's trying to establish new land, but yes.
Yeah. So what you see right now is not anything that's going to keep going.
Okay. Anyone else in the audience wishing to comment? Go ahead. I don't see anyone else, so.
I have a quick question about the dumpsters. Did we clarify what the dumpsters, whether they took up space, what they fall under, what category, as far as for business? Because I believe the business that Russell's in requires quite a few dumpsters.
And I think I'm going to have staff reiterate what they said a short time ago, if you don't mind.
Okay, so I think what we would build into the decision is that they could have one dumpster on site for the use of the garage base, and anything else would be considered exterior storage, which they did not apply for. So, one dumpster.
Can I actually rectify that? 2 would be nice. Clean wood and C&D would be helpful.
Is that for the whole property?
Yes, sir.
Not per bay.
Not for a business.
And as far as vehicles for business, if he has a business there, are his work vehicles considered taking up a parking space or not?
Well, there are 5 parking spaces required. The bylaw doesn't say who can use the 5 spaces. There's not an employee requirement, so he could park his businesses in the 5 spaces.
And he could park more on site if he was, correct? He has to have a minimum of 5.
He has to show where the parking will occur.
Yeah.
Right.
So I'm not clear as how many vehicles can be parked on the lot. Is it unlimited?
if he has a space for it.
Go ahead.
Typically, you can park anywhere within the parking area, but the board could certainly put a condition on it, capping the number of vehicles that could be parked on the site at any time.
Okay. I think we should think about that in consideration of possibility of businesses that could be there, say a garage, working on cars. I mean, if you look at any garage around, you've got multiple cars sitting there and they're not moving. I think that something to do with the ability for the vehicles to be able to move might be a consideration.
That's another use that has to come back.
Right, because it's just
As a matter of right at all.
Okay, thank you.
There's a whole category of uses that are allowed as a matter of right, and there's a whole category of uses, even in C-Tech, no matter what zone you're in, that are allowed by special permit, and then there's a whole category of uses that are not allowed at all. So if it went to some sort of a more of a noxious use, like a repair garage, that's coming back here.
Sorry.
Go ahead, I'll allow it. Yeah, go ahead.
I'd like to just address the road, and
Yeah.
considering the businesses that could be there, I think we should be in consideration to how much traffic is going to be generated from the businesses. I know Mr. Sullivan offered to subsidize 2 of 12, and I think we could think about how much traffic is going to be coming from these properties. I mean, typically, I go down the road twice a day, but a business could come and go back and forth, back and forth. So it would be nice to come up with some type of a plan on how much subsidy would be given to the road from the businesses. Thank you.
I think Mr. Simpson has said he's willing to contribute toward it, but again, too, part of that is also going to be contingent upon there being a neighborhood association established, so that there is basically you're all working together, and he will be part of that equity toward it.
Just asking for an idea of how much. We can all say he's willing to contribute. He can say I'm willing to contribute for one lot. Well, and he may be generating enough traffic for 10 houses.
Yep.
He's also going to adhere to most of the, if not all of the conditions that we just put on Sully's about having to grade the road, since I don't think they're on the same construction path, of grading the road before he gets a CO also. And then you guys got to figure out how many of you guys are in that section so you can figure out how many people have to contribute and what the cost of the grade. We had to do this, as he said, in Squam. How much does it cost to grade the road? How many people are involved with the grading of the road? And then you subdivide 10,000 by 20 of you. That's where you have to come up with a figure, which is why we said come up with some sort of an organizational model so you can apportion. Because right now we're just sort of, he's got a grader, he's going to grade it. Mark has a grader, he's going to grade it. You have a grader, you're going to grade it. That's how everybody else is dealing with it. Doesn't have a homeowners association. And a lot of these older ones don't have homeowners associations. That's the problem.
I agree that we do need a homeowners association. I don't know if you're aware.
Can you see, this is all televised, so as much as I can hear you, thanks.
When a car drives down Marble Way right now, because it is so bumpy, I can hear it from my basement. Basically, my house is shaking. So what I'm considering is the fact that if there's going to be a trash truck coming down the road and what that's going to sound like. That's why I'm talking about the grading of the road and upkeep, because the residents on the road are going to actually listen to those vehicles, those commercial vehicles driving up and down, whether it's once a day or 10 times a day. There's no restriction on it. It's a concern of ours.
That road is not stabilized, right? It's just dirt.
Shell.
One of the reasons I believe why it's not maintained is because I have a 3-year-old, I have a 5-year-old, and I have a 6-year-old. When we grade it, people use the road as a cut-through. They would rather cut through
Then come all the way down.
So
Yeah.
cars are coming down the road going 40 miles an hour, and I'm not joking. And
Well,
so I've got kids on my.
But Tom, you
on
can't
bikes.
have it both
Yeah,
ways.
right.
Either we keep the road graded so it's beneficial to everybody accessing the road that lives there, and you don't hear the noises and the things aren't bouncing and bumping around, suspension starts creaking, or you don't, and you listen to the noise. You cannot have it both ways. The only other way for you to slow traffic, because you guys own the road, correct, is to, which I hate them, especially if you're driving in an ambulance, but if you put speed humps across it, you grade it, keep it nice so people have a smooth surface, and then put the speed humps. You have the ability to do that, but you cannot have it both ways. Either we fix the road so it's passable for everybody, or we let it go to pot, which is what's been happening, because it just does. It's not stabilized. It's not stabilized gravel. It's not stone dust. It's not any of the things that people are using now to stabilize it so they don't get like going out to Uliano land out there in Matacasham where it's all the way across. Russell's Way. I mean, you've got
agree.
both sides of this coin here. can't have it both ways.
Right.
I agree with you, and I think it's really important that we're all talking about it because Marble Way is one way. When these two properties are developed, it's going to be a different place. So I'd like to plan ahead. It's going to be a different place, meaning more traffic. It's going to be a different road, and I'd like to talk about what we can do to actually work with everyone.
Yeah. But my honest to God suggestion to you is with this applicant before you at the moment, that you consider that he should be part of that association in terms of contributing. If the association doesn't come together and you guys decide that's fine, we're just going to leave it as a rutted out road, so be it. But if things change one day, then you have that assurance that these applicants who are before you will be able to contribute toward the thing. So I think at a minimum it just makes sense to put that into play right now. Doesn't mean it's going to get activated, but it's there. That would be the only thing I'd say to you.
As a resident, I would love to see speed bumps on the road, and I would love to see the businesses that actually use the road maintain it. That's what I think is fair.
Well, it's not entirely fair for either one of them to take on maintaining the road by themselves, because all of you guys use it, which is again takes us back to coming up with some sort of an organizational plan among all of you guys who do use it and have rights in Marble Way, that all the way down even past here, to come together and form a group legally and apportion out, like all the other subdivisions that have homeowners, a certain amount for maintenance. Now, whether they pay double, like Sully said, he pays two shares, versus your one share versus someone else's half share or whatever. That's the way you got to do it. We can't solve that problem here. We can make him grade it perfectly before he gets a CO. And we can make Sully grade it perfectly before he gets a CO. And they probably won't get COs at the same time. So it's going to get graded a couple of times within a fairly short period of time. And then, but before that happens, it takes a time to build both these structures. Before that happens, you guys come up with a group. And then you can come up with how much each person, including the two guys, have to pay. We can't solve that sitting here.
Can I just say something, Tom? Just real quick. I feel like I'm 100 listening to this because we went through a lot of this, especially in Millbrook. So I'm going to tell you a little story about Millbrook.
Let's stay on track.
Well, it's the same exact thing, Mr. Chairman. It is, okay? So Dioran Estates goes in 79, okay? That road was unpassable. Like, you didn't go in Millbrook from Hummock to get to the other side. You went to Matticat, okay? You couldn't get through past Paradise Drive, I'm telling you right now. So every time something happened out there, well, we don't really want the road fixed. we like to leave it the way it is, even though your vehicle would be gone in some places. In an ambulance, forget it. So here comes Sconset Gardner, buys the Larrabee property, fixes the road. It is beautifully graded, and we have had letters in our packets complaining about the road being graded too well. Only on Nantucket. Okay? This is like ringing all this stuff back when I first got on. So I think that it'll take shape, the situation. I do agree with you that the commercial use with vehicles like that versus what Sully's doing is more of an impact to the neighborhood. Forget about the potholes, okay? The potholes are caused by water, okay? They're not caused by vehicles, directly. I think that there is some formula that you guys could work out. If this was a brand-new subdivision, there would be conditions and homeowner stuff. It would already be part of it. But we can't do that with one application after all this has been done years ago. So I think that, Mr. Simpson's project is more of an impact than Sully's. I agree with that. But I don't know what that percentage is. Do you count vehicles? Are you guys going to be out there with little things like they do in Hyannis for the boats? I don't know. But some way or another, a formula is going to be reached by you guys, I feel. And you're going to come up with a way to maintain the road over time. And, yeah, speed bumps on dirt roads are all over Nantucket. Okay, Linda mentioned Russell's Way. I think it's ridiculous, but they have them out there. The speed bump is actually less than the bumps.
When you were talking a little bit about the parking, it got a little confusing to me. So can he have as many cars parked? Or only in those 5 spots can cars be parked outside? Like if there's 3 businesses and there's 4 people that work at each business and 12 guys show up to work and leave their cars there all day, is that accepted? Or are they only allowed 5 cars parked at any one time?
Leslie, go ahead.
The planning board can place a condition on the maximum number of cars parked there at any time. The parking spaces on the plan are to indicate that they can meet the minimum parking requirement, which in this case is 4 parking spaces, and they've met that. Typically, the planning board has not restricted parking in other areas of the lot that are identified as the driveway and parking area, but they could. So if you want them to include that as a condition and they're interested in it, then we should talk about that number.
I am interested in that. And my other question would be, is there a length of time that something doesn't move, that it's no longer considered mobile?
No.
We're back to the trailers is where you're heading, I think.
Or other containers?
Registration.
No.
Yeah, and go ahead.
Like the back of a dump bed, for example.
Yep.
Yeah, there's, a
gotta be
mobile
reasonable.
vehicle that is no longer registered and not moving becomes essentially a shed or a commercial building. There's clear case law on that you can't do that. That's a way to try to get around it, right? So if a situation like that is happening, and there's a couple that our zoning enforcement officer has enforced, where someone had a truck that used to be mobile, then it's no longer registered, and now it's being used to store things. That's a violation of zoning, and it's essentially not allowed. He will give them, it's somewhat subjective in that it's a reasonable amount of time to fix it, to get the vehicle either in working order or re-registered or remove it.
Okay. Thank you.
So you can't use a trailer
As a shed.
as a shed. You would have to go and say, I'm now applying for a commercial shed. I want this trailer to stay in this location.
Okay.
And then it needs HDC approval and other things in order to stay.
Okay.
All right?
Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks. Anyone else wishing to comment on this? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Andrew, did we need anything else, like revised site plan or anything with traffic impact? Because I thought that was still outstanding.
I think we need to have something about the drainage and the engineering, at least based on the new plan.
Okay.
Signed off by an engineer, that is acceptable.
Okay.
They would submit that with their, right, and it would be
Yep.
incorporated as part of your decision.
Okay.
That's where we're headed.
All right.
And can I go back to the amount of vehicles on site? I mean, we're getting ridiculous here. They have to have a minimum, and it's 5. It's 1 per 900, and he's 40,000, and he's 4,000 square feet. That's 5 spaces. So if it's 5 spaces, but he designates an overflow area where there are other vehicles going to be parked, that's what we're looking for on a plan, correct? Or do you want me to say 10 or 11 maximum?
What we don't want is,
A
through you,
free-for-all.
Mr. Chairman, is that you can't say I'm meeting the minimum and now I have vehicles parked in landscaped areas and in areas that are not shown
Right.
on the site plan as parking. Or, I guess to have the aisles and other things all filled with cars. So I think that's what I'm taking, the concern is that
It's not a
they
free
want to
for
have a
all.
general idea. Is that right?
Yeah.
That
So we'd have the 5 required parking spaces. We'd have the 5 required parking spaces, and then you would have an area designated for your trailer to back in or your truck to back in or something along those lines. Is that what you're saying, Andrew?
that there may be occasional parking in the aisles or whatever, but that
Yeah.
there's not going to be
Consistent, overnight,
consistent
everywhere.
storage or other things growing on this site.
Okay, do you understand what we're saying? Okay.
So I think you should probably pick a number or reach a number with the applicant.
Yeah. Mr. Simpson, I'm going to throw it out to you.
Maximum number of parking or vehicles on the site?
Yeah.
Yep.
8?
Okay.
Okay.
And then I'll have to somehow, because Andrew figure it out on the plan. Okay.
I wanted to ask a question.
Yes.
Currently, there are how many vehicles? 11 vehicles.
Yeah, we've
there.
already said that those aren't his. Those, a lot of them belong to Ted, and they got to go.
So that means like gotta go, meaning
Got to go.
like now they have to be going soon, and then going forward until the building's constructed. What do we expect to see? I mean, right now we're looking at a junkyard. We've got cars without license plates.
I know.
We have a trash dumpster there for
right.
residential
Let me-
household trash.
Let me keep it really simple because the answer will be
Well, this is the first that we've heard of it, so you should file a complaint with the zoning enforcement officer, and he will investigate. I mean, that's the mechanism for enforcing the zoning.
Okay, thank you.
okay. Thank you.
Okay. we're
All
done.
right, board members, do you have any other questions? Are you all kind of clear, staff? Do you have anything else, Andrew or Leslie, that we need to?
I have something, Mr. Chairman.
You need to
Yeah,
get up
come
to the
on-
machine.
Come on up, Bill.
My name is Billy Cassidy. Are you guys considering closing this hearing and voting up or down on this tonight? There seems to be a clear zoning violation, evidenced by Russell's testimony and by everybody else.
What do you mean, Billy? Ted's being there?
I'm not talking about any names. I'm talking about outdoor storage.
What's the zoning violation occurring right this second, which we don't have any jurisdiction
There is no
over?
special permit
Right.
for outdoor storage.
Right?
Right.
And
got that.
I believe outdoor storage in a C-Tech area is by special permit or by accessory.
Right.
And by definition, nothing like that is happening. But right now, there is storage taking
We
place.
just said they have to remove it. And we just said make a complaint to Marcus to remove it.
Linda, I don't want to argue with you.
Well, I don't know where you're
All right,
going,
all right,
Billy.
All right. Do you mind? Thank you. Go ahead, please, Mr. Cassidy.
I'm questioning the consideration, given the fact that there is an ongoing, or there appears to be, an ongoing zoning violation, the
Right.
consideration of a special permit in spite of that at this particular point in time?
So,
We have been told by town council that they are two separate items. You cannot deny something. The ZBA, the HDC can't deny something because there's an existing violation that has nothing to do with what's being applied for.
so
Maybe you misunderstand me. I think that this can be rectified very easily with Russell, and I think that he would probably be willing to do that. Yes?
We said yes already.
Which has nothing to do with us at this
but-
time.
All right. Do you mind? Let him continue, please.
I have nothing.
I'm happy to clean up the items in question
Does that
within the time frame.
does that help address the concern, Mr. Cassidy? Is that he will?
I don't think that I am expressing myself properly.
All right. Okay. Is there anything that is floating before us right now? Okay. Is there anyone else in the audience wishing to make any comment? All right, board members, what do you want to do?
Motion to close the public hearing.
And Mr. Borchert, Mr.
You're the
Trudell,
only
you're
two
bo-
people left.
That's right, but they're both on it, so.
Second.
Thank you, gentlemen.
He's second.
The motion is now made and seconded to close the public hearing. Discussion on the issue. Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have unanimously. Pleasure of the board.
I'll make a motion to approve with bugs, with all of the same conditions that we placed on Sully, with the exception of up to 3 individual, what are we calling them? Contractor shops?
Contractor shops.
It does not include manufacturing, light manufacturing, or fabrication for
I went-
off-site premises.
Let's not
We
get
got
into
that.
the nose.
Okay.
Let's just contractor shop.
Just
is
contractor
defined.
shop under the definition in the bylaw. That the drainage and engineering and the final site plan approval be through staff, showing a maximum of 8 parking spaces. That the hours of operation be Monday through Saturday, 8 to 5, unless you agree to be earlier on Saturday.
Later. Well,
We could start later, and how about 9 to 4?
9 to 4 on Saturday. So it'd be 8 to 5 Monday through Friday, which is far more than we're getting from most of the other contractors. Saturday is 9 to 4. Okay, no Sunday operation, commercial operation. Did you want to get into the dumpster definition?
I think we should include something about the dumpster seat.
Yep.
I had suggested 1, he requested 2.
Okay.
So-
2, but they are not, how do you want to caveat that?
cover all.
They are for,
Clean wood and C&D.
Yeah, for use of
the businesses on
contractors
site.
on site only.
Okay. Hang on, there's something else in here. Hold on. Just going back through my notes, which are multiple pages. Oh, the bathrooms. Is that something we can get into? We usually don't get into the interior of the building.
No, that's a building code issue.
Yeah. But you've offered to put 1 per shop if you have to, 1 per business, 1 per business. If there are 3 businesses, there are 3 bathrooms.
I can do that.
Okay. No outside storage, you didn't ask for it. It's all the same thing as Sully's. No on-street parking, no parking on any of the surrounding roads. All parking is to be contained on site. You've already got the screening plan, which was pretty fleshed out by the HDC. I think that's it.
Go ahead, Leslie.
That's all I can find.
I'm not sure if Ms. Williams mentioned no more than 8 vehicles.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
Location of which is to be determined through you. Yep, that's all in there from Sully's before he gets the CO. Grading of the road. Sewer connection. Lighting plans, meets the
Dark
skies. No exterior storage. Management, contact information for the site. Not the vehicle log. I don't know if that's relevant for this.
It's not.
Okay, no basement. Okay. And no accessory uses, Leslie? I think we brought that up on both of them without further relief from the board. I think that's all I can find.
Anything else, Sandra or Leslie? No. All right. I think we're clear at the moment, are we? Yes. Staff is sending the yes. Is there anything else, Linda, that you had? I think that sounds about right. Okay. So your motion is then to, I'm sorry. All right, so the motion's made and seconded for approval with those restrictions that were talked about.
What about the one thing? You want to put that in? We definitely do that. I know, but the audience might not remember that.
Leslie, the
Yes.
review after 1 year.
I think we should include that, definitely.
That was, we did with that with Sully. As I'm saying, everything we put on Sully, give or take, the vehicle log, things like that, which we don't need.
But a traffic review, essentially.
Yep.
So we get a sense.
1 year
of what's-
review.
Yep. All right.
I would have to say 1 year from CO on this case.
Well, we have to. We can't do it from today, then the building's not there.
The Sally's is a little different, but yeah.
We'll include the CO language because that's
not a
essentially
season
when they
phase
should
business.
start
Right.
operation.
Right. That's
Yeah,
the trigger.
They can't operate before the CO.
Anything else?
Nope.
All right, so the motion is duly made and seconded. Discussion on the issue. If you're all clear at this point, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed? Ayes have it unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for wading through this, and I expect to see you all again at the HDC when the buildings come back in there.
Thank you, everyone. Okay.
I don't even know.
You have 4 A&Rs before you at this point, 7906, 7908, 7910, 7911. Anyone wishing to isolate anything out?
No, we already get rid of 7907, right?
That's correct. So that's
I'll
what
make
we're
a
down to 4.
motion, it's only the three of us?
It'll only be the 3 of us.
Okay, I make a motion to endorse 7906, 63 Fairgrounds, 7908, 10 Uncatina, 7910, 68 Washington Ave in Matticat, 7911 Masquatuck, what the heck is that? And Weeder Avenue.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded for discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have unanimously. You have 3 second dwellings before you at this point. Is there a wish to isolate anything out?
No.
Mr.
Okay.
Chairman?
There's some
I just need-
corrections.
I need to clarify the application on 56 Hooper Farm Road for Tess
Please.
Anderson,
Yeah.
so if you could pull that one out.
Okay.
All right, I'll make a motion to approve Desert Island 1 Barnabas, Desert Island 151 Main.
And do I hear a second?
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have it unanimously.
There's
Leslie, go ahead.
There's a tertiary dwelling involved in this group.
That's okay. Did you what? Leslie, did you want to discuss 56 Hooper, or are we just?
Yes.
So go ahead.
We still recommend approval, but the staff report indicates that a special permit is required for the second driveway, and the planning board can approve a second driveway without holding a special permit hearing,
Right.
only when it's in connection with the second dwelling permit.
Right. That's what I'm doing.
So a special permit's not required. It's a corner lot.
And they're
We
two
recommend
separate
approval. You
structures.
just have to make the same findings that you normally would for a special permit.
Now, you're coming in separately for the tertiary? Okay.
Right.
I'll make a motion to approve
Okay.
with the second driveway.
All right. Motion's made and seconded. Discussion on the issue? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have unanimously.
Go
Yeah.
home.
two tertiary dwellings before you at this point.
I know about both of them.
What's the pleasure of the board?
Motion to approve both of them.
All right, and do I hear a second?
Second.
Discussion on the issue. Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Now you can go home.
Opposed? Ayes have it unanimously.
See,
All
once
right,
we get
so-
moving, we get moving.
All right, let's not go there. We got some work before us, so.
Marina.
Next thing before us is 7770 Marina Way subdivision to endorse the plan.
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed? Ayes have it unanimously. Stop and Shop, which is 1311, 51 Sparks Ave, 109 Pleasant. They're asking for an extension to 8/8/16.
I thought we already did this.
Go ahead.
This is for the other proposal, the Craig property.
Oh.
Motion to
Good.
approve.
Yes, thank you. Yep, second.
And do I hear a second? Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have it unanimously.
Explain this one. I don't get this.
42-15.
Explain this, Andrew. Aren't we the ones that are supposed to be enforcing it?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, so this is sort of a follow-up from the last meeting. The easement was granted, and it just said we give enforcement powers to the town, but it didn't say the planning board. No one ever accepted the enforcement powers, so they've redrafted the easement to grant them to the town through the planning board, and you need to accept enforcement only over the drainage relative to the decision.
And this is that wall, plus
It
the wall
is.
going up?
Yeah,
Motion to
it
approve.
affects a lot of properties.
Yep. Motion to approve.
And do I hear a second?
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have it unanimously. Proposed warrant articles for 2016 ATM.
Mr. Chairman, page 291 is a summary of the citizen articles. There are 9 zoning articles submitted by citizens that you should be generally aware of.
Mm-hmm.
The articles that we have discussed with you, and this is the same presentation that was sent to the Board of Selectmen, begin on page 296. So again, there's nothing we can go over them if you'd like to discuss them, but I wanted to make sure you had the same presentation that the board had. So I think you all have been through this enough to know that we are going to be putting the warrant together very soon in the next 30 days or so.
Mm-hmm.
So things will come together quite quickly. So if there is any of the articles that you want to discuss, I've also included sewer articles, so you have at least some idea of where that was going.
These are just citizens, guys.
What?
These are just citizens, not ours.
No, ours begin on page 296. The significant article, well, I'm going to go through them since you're going to ask. RC to CMI is a significant part of the master plan. The first article deals with the area in Mid-Island around Stop and Shop. The map of that area is on page 300 of your packet. Another area of CMI, which is out along Old South Road. The map is on page 303. So again, that's phasing out RC or RC2 and implementing our new zoning districts. Leslie's put together a comparison of the CMI and RC on page 304 and 305. You can check the chart. I mean, the chart is the most basic. For any of the zoning districts, that's where you need to look to see what's allowed and what isn't allowed. So I think you all know that.
Mm-hmm.
The 2 Fairgrounds Road site is page 307 and 308. Phasing out that significant area of RC2 to CN. By doing that, that will allow the town to take advantage of the workforce housing allowance that was passed at the special town meeting, Article 2.
Mm-hmm.
There's a slight correction for the VTEC and VN at the Powers property at Hummock Pond Road. That's fairly minor. The Quidnet area, we've talked about implementing a change of the R20 district, which is a town district, to a country district like village residential. That is included. Grove Lane is an area that is zoned for quite a bit of density when it's in fact quite rural and has wetlands and other things. So we're proposing to increase the, or decrease the density and change the zoning there. We've talked about that for a while. Changing, again, R1 is a district that we're part of the master plan. We are supposed to be phasing out. We have a deadline on that in our actions, and there's a list of properties. These are along the edge, and the idea is to make these more consistent with the ROH, or the residential old historic concerns of the Historic District Commission. Page 317 shows the Dimick rezoning from RC2 to CTEC and RC2 to R5. So again, we're phasing out that last remaining piece of RC2 to more appropriate districts. And then beginning on page 318, there's some text, some rough discussions about the text articles, which you should familiarize yourself with. And that runs through essentially to where the sewer articles start on page 337. What I have learned since this was submitted in your packet is 337, page 337 to 341 is the Monomoy, or I guess Monomoy South, or Shimo area. So they are proceeding ahead with that.
Good.
We thought my comment was going to go, but that is not going to go forward this year. Friendship Meadowview, that is proceeding ahead, and Somerset, yes, is proceeding. Yes, Somerset, which starts.
I'm in the down battle.
Yes, that starts on page 352. There's a list that includes Marble Way and all these other particular areas, and also Matticat, which we have not completed yet. So, I know we have to discuss tonight the meeting, public hearing for these zoning articles. The intent is to do all the citizen and the planning board sponsored ones at one meeting. So,
if we need to have a second meeting, are we going to have time, or are we going to be out of time?
I think we should be able
just in
to
case.
What?
All right. I just want to make sure we've still got time on our side if it needs to default into a second meeting for additional information or refining.
For zoning?
Yeah.
Yeah, we have time for that.
We are okay. Good. Perfect. All right. Is there anything else on Andrew or Leslie? Do you have anything else on the zoning articles coming before us for town meeting?
Can we talk about the date for the hearing?
Sure. Go.
Well, we did, and then there was an issue with it. So we'd like to propose Thursday, January 28th for the hearing. And Barry, is that something we can start earlier, or do we have to wait until 6:30?
No, let's. No, I think we can. Trust me, I'll get the day off unless something really weird is happening. Yeah, no. I'd like to propose we start at. I'd like to propose we start at 8:30 in the morning.
I was thinking like 5.
And work our way up.
So it's got to be way after 4. I can't go from 1 o'clock to 4. Yeah, earlier, but not 4 o'clock.
What do you want to do?
I can't go 12
What
straight
do you?
hours.
Jesus.
What about 5:30?
They take it so literally.
We have a long agenda.
I'm fine with whatever you want.
What would you? Our, do you want to go?
Order a pizza.
5:30. We all good with that? I mean, I'm personally.
Yeah, it's a Monday.
Yeah, I'm going to be stuck at work. Yeah, I'm sorry.
I thought you meant like you couldn't do it at night.
You going away somewhere warm?
So 5:30 on the 28th. All right. I know you're tired, but let's get through this, okay? All right, and I think the other issues before us, we're just going to table.
Yeah.
Because Mr. Marklinger is a...
Motion to adjourn at 10:20.
Anything else? No. Beautiful. Thank you all.
I'm sorry for any corrections I had on the back.
Well, you'll learn eventually. You've just been trialed by fire.
That's how I learn.
Thank you, guys.
Well, Holly did the staff report 99.9% alone, so I think she did a great job.
Good for you, girl.
You guys get to review it before it comes to us?
Yes, of
Yeah,
course
in
we
our
did.
spare time.
Yeah, I know that all that's good.
I reviewed it, but she did all the work.
No. God. You're welcome. No problem. Yes.
And we don't have 500 plans.
Yeah, I'm sure everybody's
No, I think
like
Catherine
super
got us
excited.
all caught up on that.
Night.
I know the decisions, though. That went whipping.